Chapter 862, The Devil's Right Wrist. I'm going to take down this cult. Ethan's voice was steady as he faced Nero. Count me in, Nero said without hesitation. He didn't fully grasp the plan yet, but Ethan's conviction was all the justification he needed. Together, they would dismantle the demonic sword order and make it disappear for good. You grew up around here, Nero pointed out. You'll be walking into places filled with people you know. Ethan shook his head. I've made my decision. Nero watched him for a moment, then muttered, I don't believe in God. I only believe in power. The name Credo hung unspoken between them, an old friend now tangled in the Order's darkness. But love for Gilly, and the fear of seeing Credo fall even deeper, steeled Nero's resolve. This cult had to be stopped. All right, Ethan said with a sigh. We're heading straight to Pope Sentis. There's no way he hasn't heard whispers of the demonic sword order. If anyone can help us expose them, or crush them, it's him. They set off in silence, each step carrying them closer to the heart of the conspiracy. Whatever awaited them in the cathedral, they were ready. Since the death ceremony, Sentis, the Holy See's nominal leader, has remained hidden away, claiming he needs time to heal his wounds. In truth, the ritual's after-effects have left him no longer fully human in appearance. The so-called Return to Heaven ceremony, designed to fuse human and demonic power, has taken on a uniquely subtle form in Sentis. Unlike Agnes or Credo, who underwent dramatic, world-shaking transformations, Sentis still looks human at a glance. But the faint crown of enormous horns curving from his temples and the great wings folding behind his back betray the dark energies now coursing through him. These inhuman features stand as both a testament to his authority and a mirror of the strength he relentlessly pursues. Agnes, the architect of the death ceremony, studied these changes with a mixture of anticipation and unease. He had hoped that anyone who embraced the ritual would emerge utterly transcendent, with power and form far beyond mortal ken. Yet Sentis's alterations struck him as surprisingly restrained, and Agnes knew better than anyone that the shape one took after death often reveals more about one's hidden fears and secret longings than any grand design could dictate. As he watched Sentis step from shadow into candlelight, every inch the reluctant Lord of Two Worlds, Agnes felt that underlying truth stirring uneasily at the edge of his conscience. Sentis's decision to preserve his human form laid bare his relentless pursuit of pure arcane power over any physical enhancement. To Ethan, it was a quest both noble and mournful. As they flew across the moonlit sky on enchanted talismans, Ethan fed Nero a steady stream of intercepted dispatches, each one pointing them closer to the remote refuge where Sentis lay concealed. Midway through their journey, Ethan unfolded the darker truths behind the so-called death rite. He explained that every initiate's death form is a crystal-clear reflection of their innermost yearnings. Credo, driven by an insatiable lust for strength, had reshaped himself into a towering demon. Sentis, who hungered for magic in its purest essence, chose instead to maintain his human facade, hiding within it a wellspring of arcane energy far more potent and infinitely more dangerous than Credo's brute might. Nero listened in awed silence, admiration swelling for his father. In the weeks since their investigations began, Ethan had not only penetrated the demonic sword order's most forbidden secrets, but uncovered intel that even the order's high council might never suspect. Now, as dusk gave way to darkness and the silhouette of the cult's fortress emerged on the horizon, father and son fell silent, each steeling himself for the trial that awaited within those shadowed walls. Under the cover of a high-altitude insertion, Ethan and Nero slipped past the cult's sentries like phantoms and touched down in the inner sanctum. Still, their press, wasn't meant to remain secret. Ethan had arranged for them to be seen. From the far end of the chamber, a lone figure emerged, stepping forward with unnerving stiffness. Though the torchlight cast his face in shadow, his rigid posture and deliberate pace made Nero certain it was Credo. As Credo drew nearer, Nero saw the tension etched into every line of his expression, so grave it seemed he was bound for a duel. Instinctively, Nero slid his right hand into the pocket of his windbreaker, hiding it from view. Credo, he called softly but insistently, what are the cultists planning? You know Dante, right? What kind of power does that devil possess? And what is this so-called gate of hell? What's really going on here? And what are you hiding from me? Credo didn't answer at once. He stopped a few paces away, his eyes dark beneath the hood. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his right hand and rested it on the hilt of the sword at his waist, the blade's faint gleam the only promise of what might come next. Nero, that's beside the point right now. With calm precision, Credo drew his sword and leveled it at Ethan. Was it you who told Nero everything? His voice, though steady, crackled with barely contained fury. To Credo, Nero wasn't just an ally. He was like a brother, even destined to become his future brother-in-law. Worse still, Nero's true identity as the son of the Spartan demon had to remain secret. All the assignments Credo had given him were merely trials to prepare Nero for his rise within the cadre, yet someone had turned Nero's mind against him at the worst possible moment. Ethan met Credo's glare without flinching. Yes, it was me, and it seems you played your part too. Nero took a step forward, disappointment etched across his features. Credo, I'll explain everything in due time. Credo narrowed his eyes at Ethan, circling him like a predator sizing up its prey. Who are you, really? Ethan kept his tone even. He knew Credo suspected there was more to him than met the eye. He didn't share the Spartan bloodline of Dante or the others. My name is Ethan. I am Nero's biological father. At those words, Credo's sword wavered in midair, and his face drained of color. Nonsense. Nero's father? Credit spat, his eyes narrowing as he glared at Nero. Nero didn't look surprised. Clearly, he'd known this for a while. Credit shook his head in disbelief. You're lying. Don't be fooled, Nero. Nero's lips parted, unsure what to say. Credit's doubt felt like a stab to his chest. Credit. Ethan stepped forward, voice calm but firm. Nero and I are biological father and son. He lifted his right hand. In Nero's stunned gaze, the skin around Ethan's wrist darkened and contoured into sharp, ridge-like horns, an unmistakable mark of demonic heritage. Nero's breath caught. That hand, it was identical to his own. Could his father really be part devil? Ethan met his son's wide-eyed stare. I'm not purely human. I'm half devil, and you inherited my blood. You're a hybrid, too. From the shadows, Dante let out a soft gasp. He'd been listening the whole time. Dad, you have another child? He looked at Nero with new understanding. The inexplicable bond he'd always felt wasn't just friendship, it was family blood. Chapter 863 Dante. Dad has other children? Nero peeled away the concealment on his right arm, and a chill ran through him when he saw the demonic wrist beneath, virtually identical to Ethan's. Credo stood motionless, eyes locked on the impossible sight. Ethan, why can't my arm shift back? Nero demanded, voice trembling. Ethan frowned, placing a steady hand on his friend's shoulder. You've only just awakened your bloodline. You're not yet skilled enough to control it. Nero's shoulders sagged as realization washed over him. He turned toward Credo, desperation in his tone. Credo, please, listen to me. I don't want to fight you. If you get hurt, Gilia will be heartbroken. A mirthless laugh rolled from Credo's lips. Hurt me? You're overestimating yourself, Nero. He drew his sword. Pale golden runes flared along the blade, bathing him in a soft, otherworldly light. Since you're a demon too, there's no point in hiding my true power. With a guttural crack, Credo's form began to twist. His bones shifted, flesh rippling until the man they knew was gone, replaced by a monstrous, inhuman shape. Nero stumbled backward, eyes wide with disbelief. You're one of them as well? He had refused to believe that the brother he'd fought alongside could have turned his back on humanity. Now, confronted by Credo's fully awakened bloodline, Nero's heart pounded with betrayal and fear. He wanted to think it was some terrible mistake, that Credo had never joined the Pope's hunters or lost his humanity. Yet there, standing before him, was the stark truth. His friend had embraced the very power Nero had only just begun to master. Credo's transformation was complete. He hovered in midair, encased in polished silver armor, a single golden wing unfurling from his back. His eyes gleamed with holy fire as he raised his sword. Behold the ultimate evolution of God's chosen, he proclaimed, voice echoing like thunder. I have become an angel. Nero's lips curled in disgust. Angel or not, Credo, you're no better than a devil. Without a word, Credo leveled his blade at Ethan. In an instant, dozens of spectral swords materialized around him, their blades all pointing directly at Ethan's chest. With a deliberate downward swing of his sword, Credo issued his command, and the phantom weapons lunged forward in perfect unison. Ethan, Nero shouted, panic rising in his voice. Don't worry. Ethan's reply was calm as he drew the magic sword Apophis. Light flared along its blade as he brought it down in a single sweeping arc. The spectral swords shattered like glass against its edge. As the Grand Commander of the Knights, Ethan said, stance firm. I'm under orders from the Pope himself to take you into custody. Credo laughed, the sound cold and hollow. The Pope, his authority means nothing to me. You serve his will blindly, and in the end, what will you gain? You don't even cling to your own humanity. With a cry of defiance, Credo lunged, sword raised high. Nero sprang forward, intercepting the charge. Credo, stop this, he roared, drawing his own blade, Crimson Queen, rather than reach for Apophis. The crimson steel sang as Nero met Credo's thrust, rang desperate to protect Ethan from the fallen angel's wrath. Steel rang against steel, sparks flying where the blades met. The jolt shivered up Ethan's arms, but he refused to give an inch. Across the field stood Credo, his old master, the man who had taught him everything he knew about swordsmanship. Ethan hadn't thought about that first duel in years. Back then, he'd been a lonely orphan, mute in sorrow, with no family and no home. The world saw him as a burden, and he believed he was nothing more than that. But Credo had seen something worth saving. He took Ethan under his wing, teaching him not only how to fight, but how to live differently. Whenever Ethan gripped his sword, his misery vanished, replaced by a single, clear purpose. Under Credo's guidance, Ethan joined the Order of Knights. To his astonishment, he won praise and respect from nobles and commoners alike. Someone who'd nence been abandoned and shunned could rise to aid others. That was the lesson Credo had instilled in him. Though Ethan never fully adopted his mentor's noble bearing, he admired him deeply and believed in the ideal he had been taught, that everyone is worthy of respect and love. And now, here they were, blade to blade, student against teacher. Ethan's heart thundered as he met Credo's steady gaze across the crossed steel. The man who had shaped his life had become his enemy, and neither could afford to relent. Nero's blade rang against Credo's in a shower of sparks. He gritted his teeth, straining under the pressure. Why? Why do I have to fight you? He shouted. You're the one who betrayed us. Credo twisted his sword free and shoved Nero so hard that Nero staggered back. Credo pressed forward, driving his blade across Nero's side. Nero cried out, clutching at the wound. Before Credo could press his advantage, a new figure lunged in and sent Credo flying. Ethan's strike was precise and powerful. Credo skidded across the dirt for nearly 100 yards before coming to a halt. He lay there, winded but unbroken. Stop, Ethan, Nero called. He glanced over at the newcomer. Let me handle this. Ethan sheathed his sword and raised his hands in surrender. All right, he said quietly. Then he turned to Credo. I didn't betray anyone, he insisted. I just wanted to know the truth. You speak of truth? Credo spat, pushing himself up. A cruel grin twisted his lips. Truth means nothing to one who's embraced darkness. With a sudden gesture, he drove his sword into the ground. He lifted his other hand, and the air around him shimmered. A massive obsidian spear materialized in midair. Credo seized it and hurled it at Nero with all his might. Nero rolled aside just in time as the spear whistled past. But the moment it plunged into the earth, Credo had already summoned another. He was relentless. Use the sword of light, Nero, Ethan called, pivoting toward them. Now! Nero's eyes met Ethan's. In that instant, he understood. Drawing a deep breath, he reached for the ancient blade strapped at his side, the one rumored to channel the purest magic. Its hilt glowed faintly, as if awakened by his resolve. Credo snarled, staggering back at the sight of the radiant sword in Nero's hand. Ethan stepped forward, sword at the ready. We stand together, he said to Nero, for the truth and for all we once believed in. Credo laughed, voice echoing like a curse. Then come, he challenged, raising his spear again. Come and face your destiny. Nero and Ethan exchanged a determined look, then charged. In the gathering dusk, two light-wreathed warriors advanced on a fallen friend turned demon, ready to reclaim their lost brother or perish in the attempt. Ethan stood in the heart of the arena, his gaze fixed on Credo's indomitable Aegis shield. If he'd unleashed the power of Apophis from the start, he could have ended this fight in an instant. But the sword's magic was so overwhelming that Ethan feared he might kill his opponent outright. Clutching the black blade at his side, He felt the surge of godlike strength coursing through him, but he vowed not to use it on Credo. At the edge of the sand, Dante watched thoughtfully, stroking his chin. How had Ethan equipped himself this well? His father had only ever forged 3 swords, so where had this Crimson Queen come from? Had Ethan secretly crafted a weapon of his own? Suppressing his doubts, Ethan drew the Crimson Queen, a gleaming blade of scarlet steel. It was powerful, yes, but still an ordinary sword. Without the Yama blade to awaken his bloodline's true potential, he found himself outmatched. Credo pressed the attack, each swing of his shield hammer ringing like thunder, driving Ethan back step by step. Blood spattered the sand. Ethan's arms shook with the effort of blocking blow after blow. He could see the fanatics in the stands, chanting for Credo's triumph, and with each chant the cultists' confidence grew. Ethan had no choice but to fight on, though he knew he was pushing himself to the very edge of exhaustion. At last, with a sickening crack, the Crimson Queen slipped from Ethan's grasp and clattered to the ground. He staggered back, breath burning in his lungs, cornered, defenseless. In that moment of peril, all restraint shattered. Ethan's hand darted for the sheath at his hip, and he drew Apophis. A hush fell over the crowd as the black blade caught the torchlight. Ethan's eyes glowed with determination as he raised Apophis in a single, fluid motion. He drove it forward, and the next instant, Credo's Aegis shield split down the middle with a sound like tearing steel. Fragments of the shield rained to the arena floor. Credo staggered, eyes wide with disbelief. "It can't be," he whispered, glancing at the ruined remnants of his once invincible safeguard. Ethan steadied himself, every muscle trembling. Apophis pulsed in his hand, its power barely contained, but he forced himself to lower the blade, honoring an unspoken promise. The duel was won. Now came the true test, what he would do with victory. The chamber shook with the echo of Credo's defiant roar. "You call me the devil? Who's the real monster here, me or you?" His body glowed with unholy light as he summoned the magic shield, its runes winking into being before him. Nero didn't hesitate. With a backward swing of his blade, he shattered the shield in a shower of sparks. He didn't draw Apophis a second time. Instead, he slipped on the devil gauntlet, its plated fingers etched with crimson sigils, and unleashed his infamous friendship punch. Blow after blow hammered Credo's demonic form until, at last, the power drained away and he collapsed, human and exhausted. "Tell me everything," Nero demanded, seizing Credo by the shoulders. His eyes burned with relentless urgency. Credo coughed, blood flecking his lips. He stared at the floor, trembling, lost for words. Finally, he raised his head and met Nero's gaze. "It's ridiculous," he whispered. "What kind of paradise is this? A paradise built on the slaughter of innocents." Ethan stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Credo's right. You can't claim salvation when it costs so many lives." Dante, standing just behind, inclined his head in silent approval. Then Nero released Credo and drew himself up to his full height. His voice was ice. "Credo, go back to Gilly and warn her, because this ends now." Chapter 864, Tear Down the Statue of Your Grandfather. Credo watched Nero's retreating form with unexpected emotion. The boy who had once clung to him like a shadow was finally growing up. As Nero strode away, Credo realized with a mix of pride and melancholy that his younger brother no longer needed his constant guidance or protection. A few paces behind, Ethan leaned against the garden wall, quietly observing. When Nero paused at the gate and glanced back, Ethan offered an encouraging nod. Nero swallowed hard, gathering his courage. "Ethan," Nero began hesitantly. Ethan straightened, curious. "Yes?" Nero's voice was steadier than before. "Please, don't step in to save me this time." Ethan studied him with thoughtful eyes. "Understood." A relieved smile brightened Nero's face. He wanted to prove that he could handle this on his own. After a moment, he murmured, "Thank you." Ethan returned the smile, warmth in his tone. "You're welcome, but if you ever find yourself in real danger, I won't hesitate to act." With that reassurance, Nero turned and walked into the courtyard, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, on his own 2 feet. Ethan paused on the final tier of the underground chamber, and instantly the air around him seemed to freeze. A stifling weight of dread pressed in from all sides. The weak, flickering torchlight could scarcely trace the edges of the colossal figure looming before him, a stone statue so vast it might have pierced the very earth. Even calling it 100 meters tall felt far too modest. There was something undeniably ancient and solemn in its presence, yet twisted by an undercurrent of malevolence that made Ethan's skin prickle. In his mind, it stood in stark contrast to the noble Spartan statue he had admired in the opera house above ground. Though the overall form echoed that familiar warrior shape, every surface bore blasphemous carvings and warped details, an irreverent mockery of all things sacred. Ethan felt a strange tug of recognition at its visage, as if some hidden power within the stone reached out to him. Who had crafted this monument, and to what dark purpose? He could not yet say, but he knew this place held secrets dangerous enough to chill the blood of any who dared to uncover them. Ethan paused at the top of the spiraling stone staircase, its carved balustrade twisting around the cavernous chamber like the coils of a great serpent. Every step he'd taken felt impossibly heavy, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Flickering torchlight revealed the colossal statue at the center, a silent sentinel whose broad chest and outstretched arms seemed to form an iron cage of stone. As Ethan reached the landing halfway down, he caught sight of the statue's torso head-on. The contours of its sculpted muscles were so vivid they felt alive, as though hidden eyes lay embedded in the marble, watching his every move. He stopped dead in his tracks, unsettled by the statue's unnerving presence. Without warning, a sharp pain lanced through his right hand, a warning flare that the demon's blood coursing through his veins was stirring, hypersensitive to the evil energies in this place. Ethan whipped his gaze around the dim chamber, searching for the source of that dark pull. At first, he saw nothing but stone and shadow. Then, high above the statue's head, a solitary figure emerged from the gloom. The Pope stood perched on the narrow ledge at the statue's crown, his posture rigid, chin raised in haughty defiance. In that moment, he seemed less a man and more a monarch surveying his dominion. Shock and suspicion flooded Ethan's mind. He was certain the staircase had been empty when he began his descent. How had the Pope crept here so swiftly, or had he been hidden in the darkness all along, concealed by its shroud until now? Questions spun through Ethan's thoughts as he steadied himself for whatever confrontation lay ahead. The vast underground chamber stood deathly silent until the Pope's voice rang out, equal parts mockery and triumph. Before Nero hovered a mem, and who should have been dead? Dante's bullet had shattered his skull, yet here he stood, radiating a power no mere human could possess. This was the demon Nero had sensed. "Behold your savior," the Pope intoned, eyes glittering as he surveyed the shattered stone beneath his feet. "Isn't he magnificent?" Nero let out a cold laugh. "Divine? Hardly. If I worshipped him, I wouldn't make him my stepping." Beside Nero, Ethan forced himself to remain calm. He'd wanted to remind Nero of the irony. After all, hadn't Nero himself toppled his grandfather's statue? But he swallowed the words and simply watched. The air between Nero and the Pope crackled with imminent violence. The Pope's gaze flicked to Nero, icy and contemptuous. Their past encounters had been nothing more than distant formalities, bowed heads, curt words. Now those courtesy masks were gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Ethan's pulse quickened as he waited for the first spark to ignite the storm. Ethan's eyes were as cold and unyielding as ever, almost as if that frost had always been part of him. The Pope watched him calmly from across the marble floor, his serene expression unruffled by the tension in the air. "Very well, Ethan," the Pope said at last, his voice echoing through the vaulted hall. "I will deal with you and dissolve the demon sword order." Ethan's lips curled into a faint, mocking smile. From beneath his cloak he produced the blue rose, a sleek cobalt-hued weapon of exquisite craftsmanship. "Dissolve us?" he replied, voice low and amused. "Perfect. You'll make an excellent test subject for the Savior's power, though I admit the rose is still incomplete." A soft chuckle escaped the Pope's throat. "You still underestimate divine authority." Without warning, Ethan's smirk widened. He pressed the trigger hidden in the rose's stem. In an instant, a brilliant sapphire bullet tore from the barrel and streaked toward the Pope like a falling star. But before the projectile could make contact, a luminous barrier blossomed around the pontiff, an invisible dome that shimmered with holy light. The blue bullet struck the shield and detonated in a flash, shards of energy scattering harmlessly across the floor. "Humph," the Pope said with contempt. A mere mortal wielding toys to challenge the majesty of God? How quaint. At the insult, Ethan's eyes flared with fierce determination. He threw back his head and roared, drawing on every drop of magic in his veins. Tendrils of arcane power coiled around his right hand, writhing like a caged beast desperate to be unleashed. Then let me show you true power. With a single, thunderous gesture, Ethan prepared to shatter the Pope's divine barrier and change the fate of the Demon Sword Order forever. The legendary magic sword Apophis flared into a brilliant sapphire glow at Nero's command, its world-shattering power racing straight for the Pope. To Nero's astonishment, the pontiff didn't meet the blow head-on. In a flash, he vanished, as if he'd merged into the very essence of the Savior itself, and disappeared without a trace. Nero's attack, though fierce, struck only the indestructible form of the Savior, unleashing a deafening roar, but leaving it unscathed. Impossible, Nero whispered, eyes narrowing. He knew the Savior's reputation, but he never imagined it could shrug off his full-strength assault so easily. Before he could recover, the Savior began to tremble violently, like a caged beast about to unleash a more brutal onslaught. The ground quaked, tapestries and stone fragments rattled and fell. The entire cathedral groaned as if it might collapse at any moment. Steadying himself, Nero glared at the colossal figure before him. With deliberate calm, he raised his right hand, and then in an instant of inhuman speed and strength, he slammed his palm down toward himself, the force of the strike shattering the air between them. Chapter 865, The Forced Demolition Fails. A sudden chill seized the ruined hall as the mechanical behemoth known as the Savior unleashed its crushing blow. Nero could only trust his instincts and the years of battle training that coursed through his veins. With a desperate leap, he just barely evaded the fatal strike. But the towering automaton did not relent. Its left arm swept forward like a gigantic net, aiming to snare him. Nero's heart pounded. In this cramped, shattered chamber, he had no room to maneuver. He was hopelessly outmatched. And yet, in the face of utter desperation, something inside him flared. A fierce, unyielding courage. He adjusted his stance, gripping the enchanted sword Apophis in his right hand, and squared his shoulders. "Come on, let me see what your Savior can really do," he roared. He poured every ounce of his magical energy into the blade. Instantly, Apophis blossomed with blinding light and smashed into the Savior's icy, mechanical forearm. The reverberation shook dust from the ceiling and rocked Nero off balance. He teetered, then, with unbreakable willpower, grounded himself once more. He was truly worthy of being the mightiest scion of the Sparta line. Ethan watched in awe, letting out a slow breath. Dante would have needed both hands to withstand such a collision, yet Nero had done it with one. "Watch this!" Ethan sprang forward, swinging the enchanted sword Apophis with every ounce of his strength. The blade crashed into the Savior's head, carving a deep gouge, yet it felt no more than a mosquito bite. Before he could recover, the wound sealed itself, the flesh knitting back together as if nothing had happened. Ethan hit the stone floor hard, rolling to his feet in a flash. He spat on the ground, frustration twisting his features. Overhead, the Pope hovered just above the Savior's crown, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. "Useless," the Pope announced. "Your feeble tricks mean nothing against the Savior." Ethan allowed himself a tight nod. He'd suspected as much. Defeating this monstrosity would be far more difficult than he'd ever imagined. Sweat trickled down his resolute face, each drop sizzling where it met the cold stone. His gaze swept over the towering figure before him. The Savior stood motionless, its power frozen in place. But Ethan sensed something deeper, a consciousness embedded within its armor-like flesh. He realized the truth in an instant. The Savior only moved when the Pope inhabited it. The source of its invincibility was the Pope himself. A spark of daring lit in Ethan's mind. If he could drive the Pope out of the body, then the monster would be nothing but stone and steel. With renewed determination, he readied himself for the boldest strike of his life. If the Pope truly is the central engine driving this colossal machine, Ethan thought, then severing him from its power source should cause the Savior to collapse. But he knew better than to act on impulse. The Pope wouldn't have exposed himself so blatantly unless he had a contingency. Either he underestimated his enemy or laid a trap of his own. Ethan drew in a steadying breath, banished his doubts, and made his decision. "Pope," he snarled, "your reckoning starts now." With a roar, he launched himself forward, cutting through the air like an arrow released from a bow, aiming straight for the Savior. Yet the Pope's reflexes were razor-sharp. In a flicker of motion, the Pope slipped away into the cavernous hull of the machine. Then the Savior struck. Its colossal fist descended like a crushing avalanche, intent on annihilating anything beneath it. The impact was deafening. The entire underground chamber trembled as Ethan was blasted backward, his body slamming into the stone wall. The masonry exploded around him, showering him with rubble. His organs twisted in agony, but he refused to yield. Gritting his teeth, Ethan forced himself upright amid the wreckage, his gaze as unyielding as iron. The cathedral fell silent, except for the soft echo of the Pope's mocking laughter. He turned his gaze toward Ethan, the mysterious newcomer who'd appeared as if out of nowhere. Ethan leaned casually against a marble pillar, arms folded across his chest, and a faint, knowing smile on his lips, an image of serene detachment amid the growing tension. Yet the Pope sensed something far from harmless. Beneath Ethan's calm exterior throbbed a vast reservoir of magical energy, so potent it quickened the pontiff's pulse with anticipation. "It seems we have stumbled upon a far greater treasure than I imagined," the Pope murmured, his eyes gleaming with fanatic fervor. "With such immense power at my disposal, you will serve as the perfect sacrifice to complete my grand design." A playful spark lit Ethan's eyes. "You wish to strike me down?" he asked quietly. "Then be prepared to pay the price." From the shadows, Dante watched their exchange with growing unease. His gaze drifted to the colossal statue of the Savior that loomed behind the papal throne, a towering humanoid construct bathed in a faint, otherworldly glow. It brought to mind the demon Emperor Mendes, a being whose spirit had once bound itself to a massive stone effigy rather than manifest directly in this realm. Dante's throat tightened at the memory. If the Pope planned to harness Ethan's power as Mendes had with that infernal statue, the consequences would be catastrophic. As the two figures stood locked in silent challenge, the air itself seemed to bristle with unleashed potential. The fate of the cathedral, and perhaps the world, would be decided in the moments to come. Ethan's presence before Dante stirred a strange sense of déjà vu. He reminded Dante of Mendes in more ways than one. "Villains do tend to think alike," Dante murmured, stroking his chin. He wasn't worried by the newcomer, his half-brother, another of their father's children. Ethan's aura was curiously blank. No fetid taint of demonkind, no warmth of friendship like Nero's. Had Ethan not revealed his abilities just now, Dante wouldn't have believed he shared their blood. The boy had even replicated Nero's demon-forged right arm, sowing further confusion. To conceal one's power so completely requires iron self-control, something Dante himself could not muster. He had to acknowledge Ethan was strong. "Only by defeating you can we forge a true paradise," Dante declared, his gaze unblinking. "A world without conflict or pain. Why won't you sacrifice yourself for that vision?" Behind Dante, the Pope leveled a menacing stare at Ethan. "Nero," he commanded, "show yourself this instant, or I'll carve this pretender down myself." Ethan held his ground, voice low and steady. "Do your worst." The earth shook with a deafening roar. Through the rising dust, a lone figure burst free, as fierce and unrelenting as a dragon breaking through the waves. It was Nero, his clothes in tatters, his body stained with blood, but his eyes ablaze with a relentless, burning fury. The wall that had crushed him moments before was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, powerless to snuff out his will to rise again. "Asshole!" Nero bellowed, every syllable dripping with rage at injustice and defiance toward fate. In his hand, he clenched the fabled sword Apophis, its blade humming with ancient power. It seemed to feed on Nero's anger, a scarlet glow rippling along the metal as it absorbed the surrounding darkness and transformed it into raw, surging energy. "Do you really think a weak trick like this can make me kneel?" His voice thundered over the battlefield as he strode forward, each footfall a war drum echo. "You talk of paradise, but it's your own twisted lie, crafted to satisfy your selfish ambitions. True power isn't for tearing down, it's for protecting what you hold dear." Ethan felt it first, a steady surge of power flowing from the enchanted sword Apophis. A faint blue light bathed his skin, the glow intensifying beyond human limits, clear proof he was on the threshold of a new realm. Beneath his robes, the contours of his muscles stood out as though every fiber of his being had been charged with both destruction and rebirth. Around him, space itself bent under the force of his magic. The very air trembled with a low, rolling roar. Centering his will on the blade, Ethan watched as Apophis flared with even greater brilliance. Dark blue swordlight exploded outward in crashing waves, sweeping away the surrounding shadows. Then, as if the sword's power had a life of its own, it began to coalesce behind him into a massive demonic silhouette. This was no borrowed force from some distant realm, but the living embodiment of Ethan's inner strength, his potential unleashed by the sword. The towering figure mirrored him exactly, clutching its own Apophis. Its body was statuesque, its face both majestic and fearsome. In that moment, Ethan understood. This demon wraith was the ultimate expression of his bond with the blade, a silent testament to the power they would now wield together. Every movement of the colossal statue echoed Pope Sentis's will, as if it were his very shadow, a mightier self born of unwavering faith. Its presence pressed down on everyone like an immense weight, and even hardened warriors felt a flicker of fear. Yet Pope Sentis stood unshaken before this earth-trembling assault. His eyes never wavered from Ethan, and a confident smile curved his lips. "Behold the invincible statue of the Savior," he proclaimed. The towering figure lifted its fist, more majestic than any mountain, its motion cleaving the air with a piercing whistle. Golden radiance pulsed from its gauntlet, the pure power of faith, a beacon of light that sees into every hidden corner of the heart, purifying evil with unparalleled force. "This statue will be an impenetrable barrier against you," Pope Sentis declared. He was certain that no matter how extraordinary Ethan's power, he could never topple a sacred monument forged by the devotion of countless believers. With a thunderous roar, Nero and the demon shadow struck in unison, his dark blue blade meeting the golden fist's afterimage in midair. Their clash sent a blinding flash racing across the sky, as if the heavens themselves were rent by the force of it. The ground shuddered, nearby peaks split apart, and the cult's stronghold began to crack and crumble. Nero had poured every ounce of his power into that blow. The Savior statue's fist shattered under his blade, but thank fortune, the outward shell was only a facade over layers of demon flesh. Agnes had infused those layers with specially cultivated demon cells, granting the statue incredible strength, flexibility, and lightning-fast regeneration, as well as unparalleled mana conductivity. Though its true source of power remained hidden, even this degree of damage would heal swiftly. Exhausted and gasping for breath, Nero drew upon his fading strength for one final cry. "Ethan!" His voice rang out, equal parts plea for help and a quietly hopeful hesitancy. Rudd's cheeks burned with shame and something more complicated, an unspoken admiration tangled with self-doubt as he watched the scene unfold. He'd always been a shy sort, and facing someone like Pope Sentis, the living embodiment of divine authority, only made it worse. Still, something inside him snapped. With a trembling voice, he cried out, "Help!" At that call, Pope Sentis, crowned the savior by millions, paused, golden eyes narrowing beneath his vaulted helm. He raised a colossal fist crackling with holy fire, prepared to smite any who opposed him. The gathered faithful held their breath. Then Ethan strode forward, shoulders squared and expression resolute. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low but unwavering, but a father can't ignore his son's plea. Every word weighed with unsaid emotions, duty, love, and a fierce determination to protect. Senta's lips whirled into a contemptuous smile. "Is that so?" he thundered. "Then offer yourself." Without hesitation, Ethan drew the demon sword Luther from its scabbard. The blade shimmered with an eerie blue glow, runes flickering like distant lightning. A deafening boom echoed as the Savior's fist descended, an attack powerful enough to level mountains. Yet Ethan did not flinch. He planted his feet and thrust Luther's blade skyward. In an instant, the runes blazed to life, as though the sword's edge opened a ravenous maw that swallowed the divine fury whole. Then, combining the absorbed energy with his own unwavering will, he unleashed it back upon Pope Sentis in a brilliant cascade of blue fire. The impact lit up the battlefield, marking the clash of mortal resolve against celestial might, and setting the stage for a confrontation that would decide the fate of them all. Then, Goodbye. Ethan lifted the demon sword high, angling its blade toward the sky. In that instant, a shockwave of raw energy erupted from the sword, the perfect fusion of the magic in his veins and the power he'd drawn from the Savior's own fist. With a thunderous roar, Ethan unleashed a single, cataclysmic slash. It was a strike capable of rending mountains, parting seas, and tearing open the heavens themselves. The golden fist-shaped barrier before him wavered like tissue paper under the sword's brilliant arc, cleaving neatly in two before dissolving into nothingness. But the force didn't end there. The blade's momentum carried on, smashing into the remainder of the Savior's marble statue. Each impact resounded through the temple as cracks raced across stone limbs. Chunks of marble rained down. The massive figure collapsed in a cloud of dust that billowed through shattered pillars and crumbling archways. In the heart of the chaos, Pope Sentis stood frozen, his face drained of color. The proud monument he had erected as the very symbol of faith lay in ruins, but in that wreckage he saw something more terrible than sacrilege, the proof that no idol, no matter how sacred, could withstand the demon sword's ultimate power. Ethan's hands shook as he tried to steady himself, the shock and despair roaring through his chest like a tidal wave. Each breath came in ragged gasps. Nearby, Dante loosened his grip on the rogue blade, having braced himself in case Ethan lost control. Now, seeing Ethan stand firm, he allowed himself to relax. "So that's it," Dante said, fingers brushing his chin. "The sword actually absorbs attacks?" He recalled the clash with the Savior, one of the realm's most fearsome champions. Even someone of the Savior's caliber ought to have staggered Ethan, if only slightly. Yet the earth beneath Ethan's feet never cracked, and Ethan himself remained unshaken. A blade that devours incoming blows, the very notion was as outrageous as it was invaluable. Dante frowned and thought, was this one of his father's legendary weapons, or had Ethan somehow discovered it on his own? Father had always claimed to possess only 3 swords at the start of his adventures. If this was a 4th, Ethan's very own magic sword, then his father's debt to Ethan was greater than anyone realized. Pope Saintis braced himself to fight back, but Ethan remained unnervingly calm. He produced Belial, the overlord of the Hell of Fire, and without a moment's hesitation opened fire. A thunderous boom rocked the hall as the cannon's blast swallowed the Pope, reducing him to ash, and his soul scattered to oblivion. Nero stood frozen, horror and disbelief warring in his eyes. In that instant, he understood the full extent of his father's merciless resolve. Chapter 867, The Demon Sword Family's Heritage. With the dust finally settling, Dante reemerged into the clearing. He hadn't come to unmask himself or expose Ethan's true identity. He only wanted a proper introduction. "Dante?" Ethan's voice was calm, betraying none of the tension he felt. Nero, leaning against a nearby pillar, chuckled. "Relax, kid. It's just Dante." Dante smiled warmly at Ethan. There was something familiar about the young man, perhaps a nephew he'd never known he had. He stepped forward and held out a hand. "I'm Dante, Devil Hunter." Ethan met Dante's gaze without flinching. "I know who you are. I'm Ethan, also a Devil Hunter." He offered his hand in return. Surprised by the straightforward, friendly gesture, Dante shook Ethan's hand firmly. At that moment, Letty and Trish, Dante's longtime comrades, arrived on the scene. "Dante, who's your friend?" Letty asked, tilting her head as she studied Ethan. Trish's eyes narrowed curiously. Ethan sensed their protective instinct. They were utterly devoted to Dante, and no casual introduction would pry them loose. He recalled how they'd teased each other back in Devil May Cry 5, so their current solemnity struck him as unusual. Perhaps they all simply needed time to adjust to this new chapter. After all, Letty and Trish each carried their own histories, and Dante, ever the lone wolf, had never seemed the settling down type. Ethan, Letty, and Tracy stood in a tight circle. No one else could squeeze in, and they weren't about to break ranks. From the fringe of their small group came a quiet greeting. "Hello." Ethan offered a brief, expressionless nod. Letty and Tracy exchanged glances. They'd already spoken with this newcomer and were convinced he was related to Dante, perhaps another son of Sparta, a half-brother to Dante himself. Ethan tilted his head, studying the man before him. "Dante, I know who you are. You're the son of Sparta." Dante didn't flinch. That's right. He had never advertised his parentage, but neither would he deny it. To Dante, his father was a legendary hero, and his mother a woman of such grace that she had captured Sparta's heart. He felt he'd inherited their noble spirits, so he'd never felt the need to pry into Sparta's past. After all, tales of Sparta's defeat of the devil were only the beginning of his legend. Whispers spoke of 2,000 years of unbroken life, and that, in Fortuna, where Dante now lived, Sparta had once ruled as lord. Dante had heard those rumors, but to be honest, he'd always been skeptical. Life in Sparta was almost like something out of a fairy tale, full of wondrous sights and impossible tales, many of them blurring the line between fact and fiction. Few stories were as famous as the legend of Fortuna. It was the kind of thing you heard whispered in taverns or passed around the marketplace, but nobody could say for certain whether it was real. "So, you're part of that story too?" Dante asked, staring at Ethan in disbelief. Ethan ruffled his dark hair and shrugged. "Not exactly, but our families are connected." He shot a grin in Nero's direction. "My father is Sparta's brother." Nero's eyes went wide. "Father is Sparta's son?" He thought. That couldn't be right. "My father's brother?" Dante echoed, bewildered. "Wait, so he's your uncle?" Ethan smiled. "Exactly." Letty and Tracy burst into laughter, glaring teasing looks at Dante. "Dante, how did you not know this?" Letty chided, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. "You can't expect to know every relative your friends got." "It's not like I've met them," Dante protested. "I was still a kid when my dad stopped taking me to family gatherings. Besides, there are hundreds of relatives in some noble houses. You can't expect me to keep track of them all." Ethan gave a reassuring shrug. "It's okay. I'm not keen on boasting about titles anyway, but yeah, that makes us kin in a way." Nero, still stunned, exchanged a quick glance with Dante. The unusual ease between Ethan and himself suddenly made sense. Ethan had no reason to lie. If he said they were related, he must be speaking the truth. And now, Nero realized, he truly did have family connections he had never suspected. Ethan paused, watching Dante's eyes grow wide. "So you're actually descended from the brothers of Sparta, and Dante here is the direct son of Sparta himself." He leaned back with a wry smile. "No wonder this world feels so magical. To think the legendary hero of Sparta could reappear, even if only through his child. In everyone else's eyes, Dante isn't just his son, he's almost Sparta reborn. After all, Sparta's glory dates back 2,000 years. Compared to him, the brothers of Sparta barely get a mention. I'd never even heard their names before today." Dante swallowed hard. Ethan pressed on, weaving the tale further. "The magic sword Apophis was left by my father. When he vanished alongside Sparta, he took with him both their lives and their power. Their blades, too, can't follow them. Their weapons forged to contain their wielder's strength. That's why no one knows where they went, or if they'll ever return." Ethan sighed. Dante nodded slowly, because deep down he'd always feared his father's life might have ended long ago. 2,000 years was a heavy burden, even for a hero. He glanced at the sword in Nero's hand. "Apophis? Grandfather's blade?" Nero studied the gleaming runes along the hilt. His father gave him this sword. Was it meant to be his inheritance, a sign that he too carried a hero's legacy? He tightened his grip, determination flickering in his eyes. Ethan stood tall, eyes gleaming with resolve. "I've already forged my own family sword, Ethan, using my life force and infernal materials. That's how Apophis was born too. Nero, one day you'll create your own blade. Nero, it's our legacy. You must pour your power into it." Dante chuckled, running a hand through his hair. He'd never imagined wielding a sword named after himself. "Sounds like we'll end up with an entire arsenal," he remarked, a playful grin on his face. "Probably," Ethan admitted with a laugh. Nero watched their banter, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. He shook his head and let them dream, for now. He didn't even have his own sword yet, and the idea of claiming Ethan's blade held no appeal. In his experience, family heirlooms of power all too often carried nothing but tragedy. "What are your plans for your family going forward?" Dante studied Ethan's face, unable to hide a flicker of envy. Ethan, so much like himself, already had a son brimming with potential. For a moment, Dante was at a loss for words. Ethan offered a confident smile. "I'll remain a demon hunter here in Fortuna." Dante raised an eyebrow. "Are there still demons in Fortuna? I thought Nero's descendants had wiped them out." Ethan's expression grew serious. "The gate of hell is still open, That old mechanism Sparta built long ago remains active beneath the ground. Until we destroy it, demons will keep pouring through. He folded his arms. And though the Demon Sword Order is on the verge of collapse, Credo lives because of me. With him at my side, reclaiming leadership won't be a problem. Even diminished, the Order has enough strength to make Fortuna our own territory. Dante tapped his chin, eyes gleaming with resolve. Then let's destroy that gate once and for all. Chapter 868, Nero and his Father. Nero watched as Dante raised the massive great sword, Rebellion, and brought it crashing down on the enormous Hellgate. With a final roar of steel on stone, the portal shattered into ruins. Even now, Nero couldn't fathom why his father had built such a colossal gateway to the underworld. Dante seemed equally puzzled, his expression blank, as though the wreckage held no more significance than any other relic. After all, it might have belonged to his father once, but now it was Dante's to dispose of, however he saw fit. As Dante turned away, Nero called after him, voice cracking with urgency. "Dante, will we meet again?" Dante offered nothing more than a casual wave before striding off into the distance. Nero blinked. What did he mean? Ethan, formerly known as Luther, stepped up beside him, a gentle smile on his face. He meant exactly what he said. If our paths cross in the future, we'll see each other again. Devils have lifespans measured in centuries. Nero's mouth fell open. He'd never realized his own years could stretch so far into the future. The two watched Dante's silhouette disappear down the moonlit boulevard. Then, Ethan led Nero away from the shattered square, leaving the echo of Rebellion's last thunderous blow behind them. Dante's boots clattered on the cobblestones as he made his way toward the harbor, eager to reunite with Trish. He hadn't gone 10 paces when a familiar figure emerged from the shadows on a narrow side street. Letty, her arms folded, eyes bright with unsaid words. "Long day," she said softly, falling into step at his side. "You did well." Dante glanced at her, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Couldn't have done it without you." Together, they walked on into the night, the ruined gates of hell, a silent testament to the battles still to come. Although things had gone far more disastrously than anyone had expected, at least it showed one thing. Ethan had given it his all. He glanced over, surprised to find his client, Letty, standing by his side on the dock. Why was she here? Letty broke the silence by turning toward the harbor. "I'm picking you up on Trish's orders," she said matter-of-factly. Ethan managed a tired smile. "Thanks." He stepped forward along the weathered planks, and Letty fell into step beside him. After a moment, she spoke again. "Just so you know, I'll be deducting the boat rental and the repair costs from that scuffle on board from your commission. The ship barely made it out in one piece." Faced with her precise bookkeeping, Ethan let out a small laugh. Despite everything, there was something almost comforting about it. "Do whatever you need to do. Honestly, I'd be happy even if I came away with nothing this time." Letty halted and stared at him in disbelief. "Happy? Free of charge?" Trish didn't mention that. "What on earth happened to make you so carefree about money?" Ethan shook his head, forcing a wry grin. The real complication had been Trish's insistence on loading them up with extra supplies from home, gear that ended up costing more than the mission warranted. If Letty knew all the details, she'd dock even more from his pay. And truth be told, Trish could be maddeningly persistent when it came to squeezing every last coin out of a job, and nagging him even when the funds were almost gone. Together, they stepped onto the waiting launch, the evening breeze tugging at their coats. Whatever lay ahead, at least Ethan could count on one thing. In this line of work, there was never a dull moment. Letty paced in the empty hallway, replaying her conversation with Dante. Maybe it was something about her. Whenever those two got together, a quiet rivalry always surfaced. She spun on her heel and called after him. "Hold on. Answer me. I'm your client. Aren't I entitled to an explanation?" But Dante didn't even pause. He slipped away into the corridor, leaving her standing alone. Letty sighed and muttered to herself, "Figures. I'm still hopeless when it comes to dealing with him." She frowned, trying to parse his retreating form, then shook her head in frustration. Meanwhile, back in the plaza, Nero leaned against a shattered fountain, the sudden calm feeling almost surreal after everything they'd been through. He glanced skyward, half expecting another attack. Instead, silence. He let out a breath. "Is it over?" Kratos appeared at his side, limping on one arm, and Jilly slipped in beside them. She leaned close to Nero and whispered the question he'd been dreading. Nero met her gaze. He'd been hoping for reassurance, too. Ethan, the man formerly known as Luther, stepped forward, brushing dust from his shoulders. "Not yet," he announced. "Remember, the Pope unleashed a horde of demons on the city. We've only cleared the palace grounds. There are dozens more out there." A hush fell over the group as Ethan's words sank in. He continued, voice grim. "I went back to the tech wing. It's completely deserted. Agnes has vanished. No idea where he went or what he took with him." Kratos' eyes narrowed. His wound throbbed, but the anger in his chest burned hotter. He wanted to hunt Agnes down, to make him pay. Ethan shook his head. He was prepared. Whatever he needed, equipment, documents, he cleared it all out. He planned this long ago. They stood there for a moment, wounded and weary, knowing their real fight was only just beginning. There's still so much to sort out. He must be planning to slip away at dawn, isn't he? Gile's footsteps sounded unusually heavy among the ruins, each step pressing on the tender scars in her heart and sending fresh ripples of pain through her soul. This city, once her childhood paradise and the witness to every one of her milestones, now lay in ruin, like an aged elder crushed beneath a merciless disaster. On both sides of the street, only the skeletal remains of once bustling shops stood silent. The squares that had echoed with laughter were blanketed in dust and strewn with broken dreams. In Gile's eyes flickered a bittersweet blend of nostalgia for the radiant past and uncertainty about what the future might hold. "The streets, they're all destroyed," she whispered, her voice low and laden with regret, for herself and for this land. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, her nails bit into her palms, yet she felt no physical pain. To Gile, this city was more than just home. It was the refuge of her soul, each piece of earth carrying a cherished memory. Ethan approached her in silence, his gaze equally weighed down by sorrow, yet threaded with a resolute kindness. Without a word, he stood beside her, an unspoken promise that, despite the devastation, he would face what came next with her. Ethan slid his left arm around Gile's shoulders, offering what comfort he could muster. His own body trembled. He dreaded that she might glimpse his right hand, corrupted and scarred by the power he'd unleashed. Still, he refused to step back. Staying by her side was the only way he knew to prove his loyalty and support. "We're alive," he said softly, his voice calm but resolute. "The city is in ruins, but it isn't beyond saving." His words carried a quiet strength, a promise that as long as they drew breath, hope remained. Gile felt warmth spread through her chest. She lifted her head, tears shining in her eyes, not from despair but from the trust forming between them. Tentatively, she reached for Ethan's hidden hand. Though she couldn't see its deformity, she sensed the agony beneath his calm exterior. Ethan swallowed hard, emotions warring behind his steady gaze. "Gile, there's something you need to know. I'm not entirely human." He paused, voice cracking under the weight of his confession. "I might be a demon." Silence stretched between them, charged with fear and vulnerability. Yet in that shared stillness, they found an unspoken understanding. Whatever Ethan was, they would face the aftermath together. Gile's voice trembled with a mixture of hope and vulnerability. "You're probably not even human anymore, but still, are you willing to be with me?" A small, radiant smile curved her lips as she took Rose's altered right hand, in her own. "You are Nero. No matter how your hand looks, no matter what you've become, you're still the Nero I know. To me, you're more human than anyone." Nero felt a sudden flush of warmth, as though an unseen light had filled him from the inside out. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. He no longer hesitated. Gently, he wound his mutated fingers around Gile's waist and drew her close, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. In that embrace, every ache, fear, and lonely shadow melted away, replaced by the steady comfort of their joined hearts. Their faces drew closer, breaths mingling, and just as their lips were about to meet, a deafening crack split the air. Ethan stood in the doorway, pistol still smoking in his outstretched hand. His grin was equal parts exasperation and amusement. "Well, sorry to ruin the mood," he called, "but duty calls." Gile and Nero startled apart, hearts hammering. The spell of the moment shattered, leaving their cheeks flushed with embarrassment and something like relief. Nero stared at Ethan's gun, then at Jilly, as the reality of their precarious world rushed back in. Silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then Jilly managed a wry laugh. "You always do have terrible timing, Ethan." Ethan shrugged, slipping the pistol back into a holster at his side. "Someone had to make sure the coast was clear. Now that you two have, reconnected, how about we move before the next bad guy shows up?" Nero squared his shoulders, feeling stronger than he had in weeks. He offered Jilly his hand, and she took it without hesitation. Side by side, the two of them followed Ethan into the dimly lit corridor, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Chapter 869. The Demon Sword Cult reconstructs. Ethan's rifle cracked again, the bullet shredding the scarecrow that had suddenly sprung to life before them. He lowered the barrel, flashed Nero and Jilly a wry grin, and called out, "Go on, don't mind me. I wouldn't want to be a stumbling block to your love story." Nero scowled, speechless with irritation. Beside him stood Krypton, Jilly's eldest brother and Nero's adoptive sibling, who'd observed the brief exchange with a mixture of concern and suppressed emotion. Their meaningful glances made it clear that unspoken tensions still lingered among them. Ethan laughed, a rich, contagious sound that seemed determined to shatter the moment's awkwardness. As he continued to pick off the straw effigies, strafing them from the shadows, he called over his shoulder, "What are you so shy about? You're Jilly, right? I'm Ethan, Nero's father." Jilly's eyes widened in surprise. She had never imagined that the strikingly handsome, youthful man beside her could be Nero's parent. The instant Ethan revealed his identity, her open smile melted away, replaced by a cool, guarded composure. Even as the last of the infernal scarecrows collapsed into smoldering rags at Ethan's feet, the air between them crackled with newfound tension and unasked questions about the past. She never expected to meet Nero's father in this crisis. Pulling herself together, she smiled politely. "Hello, I'm Jilly. It's a pleasure to meet you." Ethan's voice trembled ever so slightly, betraying the anxiety he tried to conceal. Nero stood nearby, his expression cool and unreadable. Deep down, he'd already acknowledged Ethan's claim. This man was his father. But acceptance only stirred more confusion and helplessness. At last, Nero cut through the tension. "Enough talk. Let's destroy those light orbs," he said, his tone low and resolute. The words seemed to steady him. He exhaled in relief, as if a pressure had lifted. Krypton, though injured, drew Durandal with the steady hand of a seasoned warrior. As Knight Commander of the Demonic Sword Order, he refused to stand by, no matter how deep his wounds. "Brother," he said softly to Nero. Jilly's concern flared. "Are you all right?" she asked, rushing to his side. Krypton offered her a reassuring nod. "I'm fine," he replied, his voice steady. He had little fear of these mischievous demons, especially with Ethan standing beside them. The mysterious man's presence alone bolstered their confidence, leaving them ready to face whatever came next. Ethan stood atop the crumbling battlements as the last of the island's demons fell, their wails echoing into silence. Thanks to Krypton's swift summons, every Order Knight of the Demon Sword Order had joined the campaign, and, unlike the chaos that usually accompanies a demonic uprising, the threat on Fuduna Island was dealt with in record time. With the island secured, Krypton gathered the knights under the battered banner of the Demon Sword Order. Rather than continue the old cult of Sparta, he proposed something new. To honor the Order's heritage, not through blind worship of a fallen champion, but through the unbreakable spirit that had always driven them forward. They would still preserve Sparta's memory, but their true devotion would be to their own strength and ideals. Work began immediately. Teams were dispatched to rebuild the Castle of Destiny, its towers pitted and shorn in the battle, and to restore the Order's headquarters to a fortress worthy of their mission. Nero busied himself with logistics, even joking that he might finally open that supply firm he'd always dreamed of. He secretly hoped Dante would deliver the neon sign he'd designed for the storefront. When the time came to choose a new leader, Krypton turned to Ethan. His courage in the field, his unwavering resolve, and the respect he commanded among the knights made the decision easy. There would be no pope in this order, only a regimental head, a servant leader who fought alongside his men. Under Ethan's command, tactics evolved. The old tenet forbidding rearms was discarded. From now on, every knight would carry both sword and gun, ready for any threat, demonic or otherwise, that might arise. As the sun rose over Faduna, spires rebuilt and banners flying once more, Credo pointed to the distant white expanse on the northern coast. "There's another stronghold we've yet to secure," he said. "The snowfield." Ethan squared his shoulders, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Then let's finish the job." The Demon Sword Order, reborn in spirit, armament, and purpose, marched onward. The fortress road wound so sharply up the mountain that carriages often ground to a halt. At times the only way through was on foot. Stone walls curled around the hill like the coils of a serpent, punctuated by hidden passages and dead-end mazes, remnants of long-ago territorial wars. This was the very castle once occupied by the Dan clan. Today, it served as Agnes's new stronghold. Beneath its ramparts, he had carved out an entire laboratory, stocked with every device he'd smuggled out of Fortuna. Credo never imagined Agnes would slip away. He'd assumed his rival had vanished for good. But Agnes thrived on the principle of hiding in plain sight, using the darkest corners under the brightest lamps to elude detection. A muted shimmer tore through the air, and Ethan appeared amid the chanting of the fortress guards. He surveyed the parapets with a cool, assessing gaze. At his approach, Agnes rose from his workbench. "Master," he greeted, bowing low. Ethan's lips curved in a faint smile. "Tell me what's happening in Fortuna," he demanded. "I want the unvarnished truth." Agnes set aside a vial of glowing serum. "It's astonishing," he admitted. "The rumors are true. Both you and Nero trace your bloodline back to Apophis, the Spartan warlord." Ethan nodded. "That explains a lot." He folded his arms. "But what about the research on the anomalous cells and demon specimens? Have you made any breakthroughs?" Agnes's shoulders slumped. "Not yet. I've only just finished reassembling the lab equipment. Even with all resources at my disposal, results take time." Ethan's expression hardened. "Time we don't have." He tapped a device on his wrist. "Prepare yourself. I'm sending you directly to the Empire's research sector, where their experts and archives will accelerate your work." Without waiting for further protest, Ethan activated the portal generator. A vortex of pale blue light roiled to life. Agnes swallowed, bracing himself. In the cold glow, the two men vanished, leaving the old castle strangely silent, its dark secrets carried away on the currents of the galaxy. I also sent the sealed fragments of the Savior along with him. The moment Agnes reached his destination, he was escorted straight into the hands of the Galactic Empire's Scientific Research Department. Only then did he truly grasp where he was, on a research station that belonged to the greatest power in the galaxy. An empire that spanned thousands of star systems has long since mastered the art of cosmic conquest. It understood better than anyone else just how catastrophic this mission could be. A short, pig-headed officer brusquely dumped the specimens in front of him. "These are alien corpses," the officer barked. "They were delivered under His Majesty's direct orders. Do not disappoint the Emperor. He expects the Savior who will sweep away all resistance." By now, Galvatron had almost complete autonomy in his new body. He hadn't inherited Ethan's genetic imprint, the one gift Galvatron craved above all else, but this chassis was more than sufficient for the task at hand. That, in fact, was Ethan's design, to prove that the fate of the universe would never hinge on a single weapon system or a solitary warlord. The Empire's superweapons were fully capable of subjugating entire star clusters, yet they each acted in isolation. Only Ethan possessed the authority and vision to coordinate them all. Jingvation, for all his ambition, lacked that singular command. If he'd held it, whole nebulae would have fallen under his banner long ago. Nuss stared at the macabre pile before him and whispered to himself, "The Savior." He already knew what Ethan had in mind. Now, in the silent hum of the research station, the final phase of the plan was about to begin. "Are you really planning to build something on the scale of the causal fortress from Asura's wrath?" Ethan asked, arching an eyebrow. Agnes could barely contain his excitement. This was a project even the Pope himself couldn't match, and with their virtually unlimited supply of materials, all that remained was to finalize the design for a gargantuan savior and set up mass production. Brimming with energy, Agnes immediately plunged into the work. Their next step would be even more ambitious, creating a more powerful artificial demon, a bioengineered monstrosity far deadlier than anything they'd produced before. With Agnes fully occupied by the fortress blueprint, Ethan turned his attention back to Fortress Voodoo. There, he oversaw the reinforcement of walls, the integration of arcane wards, and the fine-tuning of his newly crafted creatures. A month passed without so much as a dispatch from Dante. Ethan frowned. Surely Dante had dismissed Nero's fledgling demon-hunting agency as amateurish. In truth, if the Cult of the Devil's Sword managed recruitment and logistics, they'd outpace Dante entirely. Faster deployments, tighter budgets, and far healthier profits. Dante, after all, had a notorious reputation for bleeding money at every turn. Chapter 870, Stealing Dante's Business. Ever since Ethan first laid eyes on Nero and Dante, he knew he couldn't simply let them walk away. So he created perfect replicas of the two warriors and quietly placed them within the Galactic Empire, adopting them as sons of His Majesty, the Emperor himself. By doing so, Nero and Dante now existed on equal footing in this world, each believing themselves to be the Emperor's cherished heir. To make their backstories airtight, Ethan wove memories of a third brother, Virgil, into their minds, though in reality, Virgil had been dispatched on a secret mission elsewhere. The whole adoption scheme? Purely for Ethan's amusement. He even toyed with the idea of drafting other candidates in the future. Sephiroth, perhaps, if the mood struck him. What set these replicas apart wasn't merely their flawless physical likeness. Ethan had painstakingly duplicated their personalities down to the tiniest quirk. After all, a copy that looks right but feels hollow is no copy at all. He'd used the original Devil May Cry World's groove molds as a template, producing isotopic counterparts of Dante and Nero in this alternate universe. No one in the Empire, not Number 18, not Esdeath, suspected a thing. Ethan had rewritten their memories so thoroughly that any hint of inconsistency vanished. Should the real Dante and Nero ever cross paths with their replicas, there'd be no telltale slip to expose the deception. And that, Ethan decided with a quiet smile, was exactly how he liked it. Ethan had been waiting for over 6 years now, 6 long years before Virgil was destined to reappear. In the meantime, he'd settled into an almost monastic routine. Each morning he rose with the sun, carried his tea to the garden terrace, and basked in its warmth as if he'd already earned his retirement. Passers-by might have called him idle, but Ethan simply smiled and stretched his arms wide. One afternoon, as Ethan lounged in his favorite wicker chair, Nero, his restless teenage son, strode into the courtyard and raised an eyebrow. "Father," he teased, "aren't you the grandmaster of the magic sword cult? You don't strike me as a man with time to lounge around." Ethan chuckled softly. "My disciples have grown exceptionally capable," he replied, folding his hands behind his head. "They handle every demon incursion long before it reaches the city walls. What need have I to hurry?" It was true. In the land of Fortuna, sporadic demon outbreaks still flared up, in the shadowed depths of Metis Forest or on the remote slopes of the Lamina Mountains, but never once had one breached the capital. Thanks to the unflagging vigilance of the magic sword cult, the demonic threat had all but vanished. In recent seasons, reports of incursions had dropped to almost zero, and the occasional fiend that did stir was swiftly driven back into the wilderness. Nero nodded, impressed despite himself. Only then did he remember something important. "Father," he said, a new admiration in his voice, "I never asked, how did you restore Credo and the others after that last demon attack? Their wounds should have been fatal." Ethan's smile grew a touch wistful. "I am, among other things, a potion master," he said quietly. "When the curse of demonic corruption threatened to claim your friends, I brewed elixirs powerful enough to cleanse them. That is my true craft, healing bodies and banishing darkness, one vial at a time." Nero watched his father settle back into the sun-dappled chair, the soft glow illuminating lines of quiet authority on his face. Here was a leader who preferred patience to pomp, confidence to clamor, content, for now, to wait out the years until Virgil at last returned. And when that day came, Ethan would be ready. Ethan stood before the small gathering, his sapphire eyes steady with conviction. "We must abolish the ascent rites," he announced quietly. "They're nothing more than a desperate bid for demonic power, something no mortal should court." Though soft-spoken, Ethan's reputation as a swordsman was legendary. Over the past weeks, he drilled the group relentlessly. teaching them how to push human limitations until the weakest among them could stand toe-to-toe with the most fearsome foes. Yet beneath his warrior's discipline lay a scientist's curiosity, an obsession with the mechanisms of magic and the secrets of arcane research. He raised a hand for silence. To succeed, we need more than just steel and spellcraft. We need an inventor, someone who can design weapons and devices to tip the scales in our favor. I've thought long and hard about who could fill that role, and there's only one person. A murmur rippled through the room. Who? Nicoletta Goldstein, Ethan said. Everyone calls her Nicole. He saw recognition dawn on a few faces. She's a prodigy, an engineer and gunsmith of extraordinary talent. Nero wouldn't have half his arsenal without her. She's been his partner through every demon-hunting operation. Isn't she Agnes's daughter? Whispered one of the younger recruits. Ethan nodded. Agnes abandoned Nicole and her younger sister Alyssa on Fortuna Island when Nicole was only 2. It was an order straight from Pope Sanctus. Their mother never came back. Alyssa succumbed to illness not long after, and Nicole was taken in by her adoptive father, Rock Goldstein. Though she inherited her father's feverish brilliance as a scientist, she harbors a deep resentment toward him and toward the people who tore her family apart. He paused, letting that history sink in. But it's precisely because of her past that her work is so vital. She's the only one capable of crafting the kind of weapons we need to challenge those who traffic in demonic rituals. The question is, how do we convince her to join us? A hush fell over the group. Then Ethan's lips curved into a determined smile. First, we spread the word, quietly, efficiently. We show her that our cause is just and that her skills will save countless lives. Once she understands what's at stake, I have no doubt she'll stand with us. The firelight danced in Ethan's eyes as he surveyed the hopeful faces before him. In that moment, a new chapter began, one that would test every ounce of their courage and ingenuity. But with Nicole's genius and Ethan's leadership, they just might have a fighting chance. Nicole pressed her lips into a thin line as the carriage rattled along Fortuna's winding road. Her birth father's last letter had named this forgotten town as the key to uncovering the truth behind the cult's destruction. Alone and uninvited, she knew she stood little chance of slipping past the city guards. Had it not been for that careless reporter's leaked story, she might have approached Fortuna more discreetly, but that window had slammed shut. Across the ocean, Ethan sat before a flickering map scroll, his mind racing. If Nicole couldn't enter Fortuna on her own, he would force the world to notice his fledgling demon sword cult instead. He would disrupt demon hunters' contracts from one end of the globe to the other, snatching bounties, stealing glory, and in doing so, announce his arrival with undeniable force. In a realm that seemed tranquil on the surface, whispers of a new power had already begun to stir uneasily. Under Ethan's leadership, the demon sword cult dared to challenge the established order like never before. Their sudden surge was a thunderbolt in the demon hunting community. Some venerable hunters sneered at the upstarts, others watched from the shadows, their curiosity piqued, each secretly desperate to gauge the true strength of this rising threat. Not all eyes were wary. Young Nero, son of the renowned swordsman Credo, had spent his life in awe of his father's blade. Since his earliest memory, he'd believed Credo's every parry and thrust to be the very definition of martial perfection, art that cleaved both air and demon alike. But when Nero witnessed the fateful duel between Ethan and Credo, all his certainties shattered in an instant. Ethan's sword flashed with a brilliance and precision that pushed Credo to his limits and beyond. In that clash of steel, Nero's world exploded. His father was no longer the lone pinnacle of swordcraft, but part of a larger, more dangerous reckoning. And as the final echo of their swords faded, Nero realized that the demon sword cult's greatest weapon might not be its reputation, but the truth forged in every swing of Ethan's blade. Ethan's swordsmanship lesson was as clear as it was unforgiving. Before him, Credo felt every bit the novice. Ethan's critique rang out over the clashing steel and shouted orders. Your backhand is weak. Your forehand lacks power. Your footwork is sloppy. Your reactions too slow. None of your movements are sound. Ethan gripped his blade in one hand and moved with effortless grace, each step light as if he were dancing on an unseen melody. Opposite him, Krypton clutched the legendary Durandal with both hands, pouring all his strength into every strike. Yet no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't withstand the flood of attacks rushing toward him. Ethan's blows were fast and precise, each one finding a vulnerable spot, deflecting Krypton's guard and shifting the defense back onto him. Time and again, Krypton was forced to retreat, until at last he stumbled and fell to his knees. "Brother!" Jilly's voice cut through the din of the battlefield. She darted forward, eyes wide with alarm. Krypton managed a strained smile, and swallowing pride and pain, spoke firmly. "Don't worry, Jilly. This is just another test on my path to becoming stronger." With effort, he pushed himself to his feet. His body trembled from the impact of each lesson, but a fire glowed in his eyes, proof that every blow had only fueled his determination to improve. Ethan's blade had always been the heart of their strategy. He'd once confessed that, back when his demon blood was still weak, he'd stood alone against endless hordes and slain hundreds of demons with nothing but his sword. It was that peerless skill they all depended on. "There's no greater glory than a mortal felling a demon," Ethan said, his voice steady. Krypton felt the fading echoes of the return to heaven ceremony's power ebb away, yet he sensed a new strength coursing through him. "Yes," he replied, bowing his head in deep respect. Not simply for Ethan's rank as elder and leader, but for his unwavering skill and the lessons he'd imparted. "It's my turn," Nero declared, bursting with eagerness. In a heartbeat, he had the Scarlet Queen in hand and sprang toward Ethan like a coiled predator. He spun the sword's hilt to engage its propellant device, and instead of gently misting fuel, it roared to life with a blistering jet of flame along the blade. Energy crackled as the mechanism recharged in an instant. When the gauge hit full, the Scarlet Queen glowed with lethal heat. Nero let out a fierce cry and swung, the blade slicing through the air in a blaze of scarlet light, an assault born from mortal steel and unquenchable will. Chapter 871. The hierarchy of the Devil's Sword cult flames roared through the propellant, driving Nero's right hand, and the Scarlet Queen blade it gripped, into a lightning-fast downward slash. He twisted his body and chipped at Ethan with bone-shaking force. Yet Ethan had clearly anticipated the move. With deliberate calm, he raised the slender tip of his magic sword, Seraph's Edge, and caught Scarlet Queen's blade point to point. The impact exploded like thunder, tearing at the surrounding air in violent ripples. Ethan flicked his wrist, and with a single, effortless motion, he sent Nero's sword arching away. Nero wobbled off balance, but caught himself in an instant. "Reckless," Ethan observed coolly, "and far too predictable." "Is that so?" Nero's eyes snapped with defiance. He slammed his foot down on the Scarlet Queen's throttle. The engine thundered to life, a caged beast unleashed, flames dancing wildly from its exhaust, the blade glowing molten red. Every flicker of that fiery edge promised devastation. Nero revved the engine again, sparks chasing across the blade's length. "Think your precious magic sword will end up looking like this?" he taunted, voice laced with challenge. Ethan only smiled, the crackle of embattled air echoing between them. The real test had only just begun. Why not? In an instant, Nero rose to his full height, and Crimson Queen blazed to life like a streak of red lightning, cleaving through the air toward Ethan. The magic sword cult had recently pioneered a radical new design, an internal combustion engine built directly into the sword's hilt. Their goal was simple: give ordinary people the power to stand against demons. When a cult knight grips the hilt, he twists a miniature throttle to rev the engine. Squeezing a lever beside it dumps extra fuel into the combustion chamber, forcing energy out of a nozzle at the blade's base. The expelled blast supercharges every swing, turning a simple slash into a devastating arc of flame. But Nero didn't stop at the standard sword in the stone configuration. He reforged Crimson Queen from its core, stripping away the factory speed limiter and cranking the fuel injectors beyond safe parameters. The result was a sword that ran on the brink of collapse, its engine howling at unheard-of RPMs, the blade's edges flickering with pure, violent heat. No one in the cult had ever seen power like this. Crimson Queen's next strike would be its most fearsome yet. And Ethan braced himself, knowing full well that one wrong move could mean the difference between victory and complete annihilation. Ethan watched as Nero's sword, its blade glowing a molten red, hummed with barely contained power. Embedded in its core was a miniature internal combustion engine. When fueled, it could breathe fire from its nozzle and cleave through any defense. Yet that ferocity answered only to Nero's will. Ethan's lips curved in a wry smile. Facing such a weapon head-on would be suicide. Instead, he drew in a steady breath and sprang into motion. Where Nero expected him to charge, Ethan vanished. First to the swordmaster's left, then to his right, always skirting the edge of the red whirlwind that threatened to engulf him. Each feint forced Nero's guard higher, his brow tightening as he strained to predict Ethan's next move. Then, in a single fluid gesture, Ethan brought his own sword overhead and unleashed a searing arc of blade energy into the sky. The torrent of brilliance slashed toward Nero like a bolt of lightning. Caught off guard for a heartbeat, Nero staggered, but did not fall back. With a grating roar, the engine at the hilt of Nero's Crimson Queen flared to life. He grounded himself, planted his feet, and let the weapon's thrust spin him like a living gyroscope. The air rippled around the blade as it transformed into a churning red cyclone, eating away at Ethan's sword energy stroke by stroke. Sparks flew. The battlefield quaked under the duel's raw power. Ethan sidestepped the dissipating vortex and sheathed his blade with a quiet click. He looked Nero-eye, the eye, and spoke evenly. Power is nothing without perception, without knowing when to strike, where to strike, or how to wield the tools at your disposal. Nero nodded slowly, the furnace-hot glow of his sword cooling to a dim ember. He had seen Ethan's lesson in motion, and he would not soon forget it. He'd never felt his father's lessons so keenly as he did in that instant. A sudden gust of wind tore across the battlefield, whipping up dust and reducing visibility to a blur. Nero and Ethan both squinted, using the momentary cover to search for any opening in the other's defense. An idea struck Nero. He opened the throttle on the Crimson Queen, forcing its internal combustion core to scream at maximum output. Instantly, the sword erupted in flames, coiling around the blade like a writhing fire dragon. Seizing the surge of power, Nero launched himself skyward, intending to rain down a crushing blow from above. But Ethan was ready. With a flash of movement, he slipped out of the descending strike and flowed into a counterattack. His magic sword sliced through the air in a flawless arc, aiming straight for Nero's vital organs. Nero brought the Crimson Queen up to block, but he overdid it. The sword's engine roared at full tilt against Ethan's blade, and the impact sent sparks flying as metal bit into metal. The force of the clash cleaved a crack in the earth beneath their feet. Bang! The shockwave knocked Nero off balance, and in the next heartbeat he found himself hurled backward by the reverberation of Ethan's blade. Dust swirled around him as he struggled to regain his footing, and the true test of his skill had only just begun. "You really do love charging straight in, don't you?" Nero sneered, eyes narrowing. "You can't even tell when you're being played, let alone see what's right in front of you." Ethan shook his head, unsettlingly calm. "Come again?" Unimpressed, Nero's blade, the Crimson Queen, blurred into a cascade of afterimages. Each swing cracked the air with thunderous roars and sparks. But Ethan met every strike with pinpoint precision, parrying and countering until he found Nero's opening. Within moments, Nero's defenses gave way. "That's enough for today," Ethan said with a relaxed smile, not a drop of sweat on him. Around them, the other knights of the Demon Sword cult watched in awe. Since their reformation, none of them carried the old Excalibur. Instead, each knight had been issued a newly forged demon sword, products of Ethan's scientific genius. He had dismantled and reimagined the legendary blade, creating an array of specialized weapons. There was the Thunder Demon Sword, its core forged from Thunder Beast organs to channel raw electricity, and the Fire Demon Sword, constructed with heat-melt polymers that superheated the blade on command. And these were only the beginning of Ethan's innovations. Ethan paused in the center of the training yard, surveying the new recruits with calm, steady eyes. "There's one more weapon I need to introduce you to," he said, drawing a slender sword that hummed faintly at his side. "This is the high-frequency Demon Sword. It gains its incredible sharpness and cutting power by vibrating at an extremely high rate." He shrugged, as if explaining something that still didn't quite make sense to him. "Why Demon Sword? I don't know. Maybe there's some demon named High Frequency out there, but I've never met him." All I can tell you is that when this blade vibrates, it can slice ordinary demons in half with a single blow. There isn't a demon alive that can withstand it." A few of the recruits exchanged astonished looks. One ventured, "So it's like a magic chainsaw?" "Exactly," Ethan replied with a half-smile. "That's how the elders describe it, a chainsaw made of magic steel. The blade vibrates so rapidly, it essentially tears through flesh and bone." Sheathing the demon sword, Ethan drew another weapon, shorter and heavier. Next up is our enhanced version of the stone sword, called the Strong Magic Sword. Unlike the demon sword, this one has multiple power, settings, or gears. Gear 1 feels just like a regular stone sword, so everyone here starts on that. Gear 2 demands much more skill and magical stamina. Few can master it. Beyond that, there are even higher gears, each unlocking greater power at the cost of strain on the wielder. He turned back to face the recruits. "Finally, there's our ranking system. It's simple. Each demon you slay counts as 1 rank point. Slay a level 1 demon, and you earn 1 point. Slay 10 of them, and you're rank 10. We use these ranks to measure your strength and to decide who takes on which missions. It makes sure we send the right people where they're needed most, and keeps us alive." Ethan paused, letting the information sink in. "That covers our main weapons and how we rank our fighters. Anyone have questions?" Silence stretched across the yard. Ethan nodded, satisfied. "Very well, get some rest. Tomorrow, we begin real demon slaying." Ethan leaned forward as Nero addressed the assembly. "There's no cap on our levels," Nero announced, voice echoing off the stone walls. "With every new rank come greater privileges, higher pay, and elevated status. But let's be clear, no one here is guaranteed level 100. In fact, that's only the starting point. Ordinary demons already hover around that mark. Only by slaying truly powerful fiends can you unlock special classifications." A ripple of excitement swept through the crowd. Under this new hierarchical system, the magic sword cult swordsmen had thrown themselves into demon hunting with unprecedented zeal. What had once been a solemn duty had become a lucrative opportunity. Bonuses, benefits, and rapid advancement now awaited anyone bold enough to face the realm's deadliest creatures. Chapter 872, Holy Demon Island, the Demon Sword Order makes its mark. Several years have passed since Ethan founded the Demon Sword Order. What began as a small fellowship determined to warn the world of the Devil's return has grown into a powerful faction with thousands of members. They travel from town to town, preaching the existence of demons and revealing their weaknesses, so that no one is caught unprepared. Their reach has even extended to the remote outpost of Holy Demon Island, where ancient rifts, demon holes, much like those at Fortuna, tear open the veil between worlds. Holy Demon Island was long protected by the Guardian Hand, a clan of warrior priests sworn to keep demonic forces at bay. But despite their best efforts, they could not stop the Demon Sword Order from establishing a permanent garrison on the island's northern shore. Walls of blackened steel rose where rolling green hills once lay, and Ethan's swordsmen patrol the beaches, ready to cut down any demon that slips through the rifts. It was amid this uneasy occupation that Ethan first encountered Lucia. She stood alone in the ruins of an old chapel, her silver eyes reflecting the flicker of torchlight. Although she wears the white robes of a Guardian Hand priestess, her grace and precision in battle betray something more than mortal. Rumor in the Order has it that Lucia once worked alongside Dante, the legendary devil hunter from Devil May Cry 2, yet she never clings to him the way other women might. Instead, her heart remains tethered to this island, to a duty she cannot forsake. In truth, Lucia is no ordinary priestess. She is an android, an artificial demon, created by the shadowy Snake Company to summon real demons onto Holy Demon Island. The project was designed to crack open the island's rifts, unleashing an army for the company's own ends. But Lucia proved unstable. She resisted her programming and refused to carry out the ritual. Branded a failure, she was abandoned and left to wander the island, torn between her original purpose and the faith she adopted from the Guardian Hand. Now, guided by Ethan's calm confidence and the Order's mission, Lucia faces a choice. Embrace her dark origin and finish what she was built to do, or stand with the humans she's sworn to protect. As midnight approaches, the rifts grow restless, and the fate of Holy Demon Island hangs in the balance. According to her own story, Mathil, one of the island's original residents, found the young woman lost and alone and took her in as a daughter. Later, she says, she crossed paths with Baroque. Baroque is not someone we can handle, Lucia warned the assembled knights of the Demon Sword Order. Never underestimate your enemies. Nero bristled at her words. As the Order's honored demon swordsman, he'd personally slain hundreds, if not thousands, of lesser demons. How could a single demon like Baroque compare to Belial, overlord of the flame hell? He's not just any demon, Lucia shot back, exasperated. He's the Balrog Baroque, right hand to the Chaos Overlord Argisax. That title alone is impressive, she continued, pacing before them. This demon once clashed with Emperor Mendes himself and seized control of half the demon realm. He's known among their ranks as the overlord of the demon world. Ethan leaned against the stone wall, arms folded, his tone deceptively casual. Since Argisax's fall, Baroque has only grown more powerful. Over the past decade, he's strengthened his hold on the demon legions and somehow even crossed into our world. Lucia exchanged a worried glance with Nero. That's the part I can't fathom, she admitted. How did Baroque escape the rift between realms and appear here in our lands? Silence fell over the knights as they realized the magnitude of the threat facing them and the mystery that still had to be solved. Even though Holy Demon Island was notorious for tier points into the demon realm, no creature of genuine infernal power could slip through unchallenged. In theory, a warlock could rip open the veil with a forbidden rite, but with Mahdi, Elle, and Lucia posted at every breach, no one would dare attempt it. Nero caught Ethan's eye and offered a confident grin. Relax, the demonic sword order is here to eradicate every threat. Without warning, Lucia lunged forward, her blade tracing a deadly arc through the air. She wanted to show these newcomers just how serious the danger was. Ethan raised a hand to keep the peace. Nero, take her on, lightly, just enough to teach them a lesson. The corner of Nero's mouth twitched up. Understood. As the small party made its way along the winding mountain track toward Baroque's stronghold, demons streamed out from freshly opened rifts in the rocks. These were no mere illusions or low-grade fiends. They were real demons, pouring through the same breach Baroque had used to cross into this world. Demonkind proved astonishingly varied. Shapeshifters who could mimic any form, sorcerers wielding corrupt magic, hulking brutes with instantaneous regeneration, and venomous horrors whose very touch spelled death. Their diversity outstripped humanity's, and as with any people, their personalities ranged from feral savagery to cold, calculating cunning. One trait, however, bound them all, a relentless, insidious guile. They treat humans like nothing more than livestock, or worse, like stones lying by the roadside. Lucia watched the Demon Sword Order's knights carve through the demons with ruthless efficiency. Their movements were precise, almost elegant, and their eyes sparkled at every fallen fiend, as though each corpse were a priceless treasure. After all, in the Order's dark hierarchy, the only way to rise is by slaying demons, and here in Fuduna, the forbidden realm where devils roam unchecked, they were in demon-hunting paradise. Nero himself lounged against a shattered pillar, barely bothering to swing his blade. He seemed bored, his attention fixed instead on the distant roar of Balrog Baroque. Deputy Leader Credo had remained behind in Fortuna, buried in paperwork and logistics. And Ethan, formerly known as Luther, was stuck in the command tent, poring over reports. It suited him about as well as a demon's kiss. He'd much rather be at the front, spearheading the demon hunts. Bureaucracy was the one thing he truly despised. Lucia couldn't take her eyes off Nero. She'd challenged him to a spar only days ago and been soundly defeated. What she didn't know was that he'd wielded not only the Crimson Queen, but also the secret blade Apophis in his right hand. He'd struck swiftly and decisively, and Lucia had fallen before she even realized how outmatched she was. Now, watching him idle so arrogantly, she clenched her fists. The next time they crossed blades, she vowed, it would be different. Although Nero had deliberately held back from using Crimson Queen with his right hand, Lucia found herself powerless against his left. Crushed in defeat, she finally grasped why the Demon Sword Order carried such unshakable confidence. Nero himself had admitted he wasn't their strongest member. His father, Ethan, the Order's leader, held that distinction. The two stood side by side, yet they shared nothing in common, neither in appearance nor in bearing. Ethan looked more like a restless youth than a seasoned commander, and Lucia struggled to accept him as Nero's father. Brothers, she thought, not father and son. Behind them, the carnage of the Order's attack on nearby livestock had driven the lesser demons into a panic. At the mere sight of Ethan and Nero, those demons had fled, vanishing down a winding path that led to a cavern where another figure awaited. Lucia tilted her chin to indicate Nero. There, framed by flickering red flames, stood Baroque. He held his ground, silent but alert, his eyes never leaving the pair. After a moment, Baroque's deep voice echoed in the cavern. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "You have been forthright. Now tell me, why have you come?" Nero stepped forward, a sly grin on his face. "Feeling a little shy?" Baroque's response came in a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to shake the air itself. "At last, yo, you've arrived." Lucia's eyes narrowed. "So you were waiting for us?" "Of course," Baroque replied, his massive frame advancing with each word. "I knew sooner or later hunters like you would show up." The ground trembled under his weight, and Lucia stumbled to the earth. "Since Argosax fell, I've had no worthy opponent," Baroque continued, flexing his enormous fist. "I vowed one day to surpass him, a fire that's burned in my heart ever since." With that he opened his hand, revealing a faintly glowing shimmer. "But now another power guides me, one that has awakened my boredom into fierce exhilaration." Drawing on this energy, Baroque tore open the barrier between the demon realm and the human world. Ethan watched the pale light dancing in Baroque's palm and recognized it instantly. The power of the Yama blade. That ancient Spartan relic, Virgil's favorite sword, had been shattered long ago and scattered across the demon world. It seemed Baroque had reassembled its fragments to pierce the veil between worlds. Dante, who'd once been trapped alongside Argosax, was said to have used the same power to break free, though Ethan knew that remained Dante's own theory. Chapter 873. After Argosax and Mondes, all are traitors. Ethan listened in silence as Dante laid out his defense. On the surface, his reasoning wasn't entirely unsound. It was the undemon sword's fragment that had torn open the barrier between realms, giving Dante his chance to escape the demon realm. But in doing so, it also scattered shards of the Yon demon sword across the mortal world, shards the demon sword order would soon recover. Once they claimed them, their ambitions swelled unchecked, and the seeds of the Fuduna catastrophe were sown. "You really do make it sound simple," Ethan shot back, tension coiling in his voice. From the shadows, Nero stepped forward, silent as night. With a single fluid motion, he drew the Crimson Queen from beneath his coat, a blade whose very presence seemed to quiver with lethal promise. The moment it was revealed, the air around them trembled as if in sheer terror. Then came the roar. Baroque, the Balrog of legend, erupted into their midst, engulfed from head to toe in roaring flame. The ground quaked beneath his massive feet, and even the wind fell hushed, cowed by the demon's aura. Each breath Baroque exhaled cast sparks into the gloom. His skin was a living furnace, and his eyes burned like molten rock, wild, arrogant, and utterly relentless. The demon's form swelled with pure, furious power, every muscle taut, every vein pulsing, as if it could ignite the air itself. It was like a volcano on the verge of eruption, ready to turn the world to ash. "Come on, human," it thundered. "Show me the courage and strength that make you worthy of facing me, Ethan. In all my centuries in the abyss, I've never seen a being who stirs my blood like you." Flames roared around the demon, and its voice echoed like rolling thunder, shaking the very ground. At Ethan's side hovered the Crimson Queen, her sword's tip grazing the earth, a silent promise that with a single, graceful motion she could cleave through the demon's defenses. A cool, detached smile curved Ethan's lips, reflecting equal parts amusement and confidence. With a casual wave of his hand, he dispersed the heat rippling from the infernal blaze, as if even that scorching air were no threat to him. "Tell me," he drawled, "why are demons so obsessed with fire? Is it because fire can hide your fears, or because you think it will let you conquer the world?" When Baroque heard that, a flash of anger lit in his eyes, but almost at once it gave way to a deeper, almost fanatical zeal. He leaned forward, voice low and forceful, brimming with pride. "Other demons may command fire," he said, "but I am nothing like them. My flame is an extension of my soul, the very proof of my existence. It is not merely a weapon, it is my ultimate pursuit of power." With a roar, Baroque's body swelled as the flames cloaking him flared to life. The air around him ignited. Heat waves rippled outward, engulfing the nearby trees and derelict houses. In moments, the entire battlefield was a sea of fire, tongues of flame shooting into the night sky and casting Baroque's twisted face in an ominous glow. Across the blaze, Nero stood his ground. He met that fiery onslaught with nothing more than a cool, steady gaze. Glancing once at the surrounding inferno, he turned his eyes back to Baroque. He knew, in his bones, that this was only the beginning of their true conflict. Baroque's fist flared with destructive power, flames dancing wildly across his knuckles as if they'd ignite the very air. "Go to hell," he bellowed. "Can you withstand this scorching blow?" With a deafening crash, he drove his fist down at Nero. In that instant, Nero's demonic right wrist shot up with impossible speed and unwavering precision, catching the massive punch without so much as a tremor. Instead of an earth-shaking explosion, their clash produced only a swirl of fire and arcane energy, a silent, tension-filled standoff. Lucia stood frozen, eyes wide. She had never witnessed anything so electrifying. The gap in raw power was obvious, yet Nero had somehow rendered it irrelevant with a near mem, a miraculous display of control. "How's that for a block, Balrog?" Nero called out, laughter cutting clearly through the roar of flames. His tone was light, almost playful, as if this furious exchange were no more than a casual spar. Baroque's eyes flickered with a mixture of shock and fury. "You," he stammered, trembling. Nearby, Ethan, who had wandered here simply to observe, let out a soft sigh. A demon? Hardly worth his attention, he decided, turning away with indifferent curiosity. After the downfalls of Argosax and Mendes, the only demons left in the demon realm were those driven by betrayal. Mendes himself had climbed to power on a single stroke of luck. He'd swallowed the fruit of a magical tree, a harsh reminder that even fortune can be a weapon. Ethan grasped the hilt of his blade, the Crimson Queen, and ratcheted it up to its fifth and highest gear. The sword thrummed with unleashed energy, its crimson edge glowing so brightly it seemed a flame. With a fierce cry, he lunged at the massive demon known as Baroque. Baroque met the attack head-on, blocking Ethan's sword blow with a fist wreathed in hellfire. The impact scorched the stone underfoot, and for a heartbeat, the demon's flames wavered. Ethan thought he'd found an opening. "It's not over yet," he shouted, swinging again. But Baroque retaliated with terrifying speed. His arm blurred into a colossal shadowed fist, an unholy echo of Ethan's own Shoryuken, and slammed the hero to the ground. Sparks flew, and the air trembled as the demon rose on scorched knuckles, then whipped his molten fist back toward Ethan. Ethan's eyes flared. In all his years as a sword cult champion, he'd never faced a demon of such sheer endurance. Summoning every ounce of will, he drove the Crimson Queen straight into Baroque's fist. They collided in a thunderous blast, but instead of shattering the demon's arm, the Crimson Queen itself exploded in a shower of red steel and smoke. When the dust settled, Ethan staggered to his feet, crimson shards drifting around him like blood rain. Lucia and the other sword cult members blinked, stunned. Lucia's voice trembled in the smoky silence. "What just happened?" That weapon was the third-generation Scarlet Queen, a marvel of cutting-edge technology and rare materials. Its power was immense. Nero had no trouble pushing it to fifth-gear output, but anything beyond that was beyond his control. He'd need his right hand specially attuned to handle such force. There was no way something so robust could break this easily, and Ethan had suspected exactly that. Leaning in for a closer look, Ethan saw a faint glow flickering in Baroque's clenched fist. "What's that?" Lucia asked under her breath. In an instant, the glow shattered. At the same moment, the two broken halves of the Scarlet Queen pulsed with the same pale light. Then, as if they had fulfilled their purpose, both fragments disintegrated into dust-like motes and vanished. What just happened? Baroque stared at his empty palm in shock. Nero's eyes went wide. Those were shards of the Yama sword. Ethan, holding the intact Yama sword in his other hand, remained calm. "Yes," he said quietly, "but the shard has disappeared." He met Baroque's gaze. "That fragment may have been the key to your arrival in the human world." Lucia's eyes narrowed as Ethan spoke. That strange artifact he mentioned, could it really be the reason Baroque managed to slip into the human realm? It made chilling sense. If Holy Demon Island harbored a hidden portal large enough to admit a demon of Baroque's power, how had its guardians never detected it? Every clue pointed to whatever secret Ethan was hinting at. At that realization, Nero felt his fury swell until it threatened to burst from his chest. His beloved sword, the Crimson Queen, his stalwart companion through countless battles, the silent witness to his every triumph and trial, had been shattered in an instant. Worse still, it seemed utterly beyond repair. Despair and indignation coiled together in his heart, demanding release. He thrust out his hand, summoning swirling azure energy. The sword Apophis materialized in a flash of cold light, its blade humming in the dusk like an incoming storm. "I'll carve you to pieces," Nero snarled. His voice was low but deadly, each word ground out between clenched teeth, aflame with retribution. "Are you ready to answer for what you've done?" Baroque's sudden question stunned Nero. Then it hit him. This devil had somehow misread his power. He shook his head, forcing a wry smile. "No," he said, "I'm a descendant of the magic swordsman Apophis." "Magic swordsman Apophis?" Baroque rumbled, unfamiliar with the name. Nero felt a flicker of amusement. How had Ethan slipped this misinformation into the Balrog's mind? He opened his mouth to mock Baroque's ignorance, but paused when he caught the subtle shift in the demon's expression. First confusion, then shock, and finally outright disbelief. "A descendant of Apophis? Are you his son?" Baroque's voice trembled. Nero shook his head. "No, his grandson." Baroque stared, astonished. He hadn't expected this abyssal fire demon to recognize the name of the legendary swordmaster. "So you're Apophis's grandson," he murmured. "Then the demon swordsman Ethan must be your father?" Nero inclined his head and gestured toward Ethan. "He is." Lucia stared at Ethan beside her, eyes wide with disbelief. "Who is the demon swordsman Apophis?" Ethan's smile was calm, but his eyes shone with distant memories. "He's Sparta's younger brother, and a legendary magic swordsman in his own right." "Sparta?" Lucia echoed, incredulous. "You mean that Sparta, the world-renowned magic swordsman?" Ethan nodded. "Exactly. Apophis is his blood brother." Shock trembled in Lucia's voice. She searched her mind for any trace of the names, but they felt more like myth than history. Sensing her confusion, Ethan reached out and rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Listen, Lucia, a long time ago, our world wasn't this peaceful. Humans and demons waged brutal wars, and Sparta and Apophis were two of the greatest heroes on opposite sides of that conflict. They had fought side by side, driving demons back into the abyss again and again, preserving the fragile peace of these lands." Ethan spoke up, his tone suddenly earnest. "You remember that, Dante?" Lucia glanced at Dante. "You remember?" "I do," Dante confirmed simply. Ethan gave a slow nod. Lucia felt a wave of relief. If the flames licking Baroque's form faltered, it meant he'd lost both the will to fight and the strength to continue. In any case, she had no wish to press him further. Nero, too, lowered his enchanted sword Apophis and chuckled. "So, you're going to admit defeat?" Baroque's reply was short but unwavering. "Yes." His voice was soft, yet it carried a weight that surprised them all, as though he were declaring that surrender wasn't the end, but the first step toward something new. Then, just when everyone assumed the battle was truly over, the fire around Baroque blazed to life again. It was no longer the wild inferno of rage or revenge, but a steady, hopeful glow. Proof that his purpose had simply shifted. He still intended to walk the warrior's path, only in a different form now. "Nero," Lucia called, her voice trembling with sudden urgency and unease. She felt the energy surging through a Baroque shift, a metamorphosis that defied life, death, even physical form. A knot of dread tightened in her chest. At the brink of his end, what desperate act might Baroque unleash? Yet Nero remained unnervingly composed, his deep eyes fixed on the scene before him. It was a silent accord between titans, no words needed, only mutual respect and understanding. Then Baroque unleashed a thunderous roar. Flames rippled across his body like wind-whipped waves, churning ever fiercer until they coalesced into a vast, spiraling vortex that swallowed him whole. In that instant, time seemed to stand still. Every breath was held as the inferno disintegrated his form into dust, which scattered on the wind. And yet, from the heart of that blazing storm came something entirely unexpected. A surge of raw force that pulsed outward and resonated with the magic flowing through Nero's veins. The dust motes around Ethan stirred as if alive, spinning faster and faster before coalescing into a single, sleek magic device. In an instant, it snapped onto his forearms and shins, fastening itself there with uncanny precision. Bathed in Baroque's lingering power, the newly formed tool pulsed with an eerie glow, its surface humming with the distant echo of Apophis, as though a fresh legend had just been born. Before Ethan could collect his thoughts, Baroque's voice rang out in his mind, resolute and undaunted. I know I'm weaker than you, and I regret that I can't beat you now, but I still hunger for greater challenges. I refuse to be silenced here. His words resonated deep in every heart within earshot, a defiant final wish, a boundless vision for the days to come. In this new form, Baroque's very essence woven into the magic tool, he would remain by Ethan's side. He would share in every fierce battle, witness every triumph and setback, and one day, when his strength had grown, he would stand eye to eye with Ethan again. Ethan rubbed his temples, bewildered. Good grief, what a stubborn spirit, and I never even asked for company. Chapter 875, The Demonic Tree. Ethan listened to Baroque's explanation, memories of Matilda's lessons echoing in his mind. Most magic tools, she'd told him, were nothing more than demons forced or coaxed into new forms. If you could overwhelm a demon with raw power or forge a strong bond with it, the creature would willingly transform itself into a weapon or artifact, a magic tool under your command. I don't need magic tools, Ethan had replied stubbornly when Matilda first mentioned them. I'm not interested in demon-made weapons. He hated demons. Even though he himself was a created demon, that hatred burned within him. He refused to wield weapons infused with demonic energy. But Matilda had persisted. One day, Ethan, you may face demons far stronger than yourself. No matter how much you train or how many battles you survive, your own strength has limits. A magic tool could give you the edge you need against those foes. Ethan had shrugged her off. He'd never laid eyes on a magic tool and didn't expect to ever need one. Yet here he was, listening to Baroque explain exactly how those tools came into being, and realizing that Nero's sword was itself a magic tool. Baroque's words snapped him out of his thoughts. Ethan glanced at the sword Nero held, its blade humming with a faint, malevolent light. So that's how it works, Ethan murmured. The sword in Nero's hand, it's a magic tool, too. Ethan stared at the artifact pulsing in Lucia's hand. Magic tools were astonishingly powerful and unbearably unpredictable. Lucia's expression was conflicted. How should we handle it? She asked quietly. Nero, reclining nearby, yawned. He paid no mind to the object that Baroque had just transmuted. It's yours, he drawled with a casual shrug. Ethan gave a thin smile. Over the years, the magic sword cult had slain countless demons, yet almost none had ever consented to become living implements of power. Starting today, he said, sheathing his sword with calm precision, our cult will assign forces to Holy Demon Island as well. Lucia blinked in surprise. You're going to station your knights here? He nodded and turned to her. The Guardian Hand clan is desperately short of manpower. Our reinforcements could be mutually helpful. She bit her lip. The clan didn't just lack soldiers, they were on the edge of collapse. Most of their fighters bore only trace demon blood, and they were severely outmatched in both skill and numbers. Lucia suspected Ethan's proposal was little more than a polite gesture. She studied Ethan's impassive face. He seemed utterly oblivious to her doubts. The one thing he cared about, beyond the next battle, was his obsession with Devil May Cry lore. The characters, the weapons, the thrill of each encounter. Female leads, Lucia realized bitterly, had never impressed him. He was notoriously picky, and her own story, years locked away by Dante, then rescued and guided to find her purpose, meant nothing in his eyes. Lucia sighed inwardly. She still hadn't decided whether to accept his offer. But before she could speak, Nero tossed aside a discarded scroll and rose to leave. And the island's distant roar of demon activity reminded them all why they were here. Ethan met Lucia's gaze one last time. Think it over, he said softly. We leave at dawn. With that, he turned and strode away. Lucia watched him go, the weight of her choices heavier than ever. Lucia sat motionless, her cheeks wet with tears she refused to admit. Dante knelt before her, his voice unexpectedly gentle. Demons don't cry, he said softly, and these tears are proof that you're still human. Then, as if it came naturally, he brushed a tear from her face with the lightest of touches. The simple act, so uncharacteristic of a demon, sent a shiver through her defenses. As Holy Demon Island's guardian, Lucia had always prided herself on unshakable composure. Yet now, facing Dante's quiet kindness, her resolve cracked. She dared not look up. She feared that one more word from him would set tongues wagging, linking his name to Letty and Tracy, in a whirl of scandal. Still, beneath that worry, something warmer stirred. Curiosity, perhaps even hope. Hidden in the shadows, Ethan watched them with a knowing smile. Now that the Demon Sword cult had claimed Holy Demon Island, the ancient Guardian Hand clan no longer had a purpose. Lucia was free to follow her heart. And yet Dante, ever elusive, had avoided the island completely since his return from the demon world. Only when Matilda discovered his whereabouts and sent for him did he resurface, and even then, he and Lucia remained polite strangers. Ethan allowed himself a private thought. If demons continued to appear on the island, if their visits became frequent, surely Dante would find a reason to return. What a sight it would be to watch their next meeting. Later, when Ethan and Nero arrived at Fortuna's headquarters, they learned someone had already sought out Nero, someone eager to join the Demon Sword cult. It seemed the next chapter was about to begin. Credo had no idea where Nicole came from, but since she claimed to be Agnes's daughter, he decided to let her stay. Nicole had indeed arrived, albeit later than he'd originally planned. Ethan paused to consider his next move. It was time to deploy the Yama sword. Naturally, he would only send a replica into the field. The authentic blade would remain locked away in his private vault, just a stone's throw from his current hideout. Meanwhile, on a nearby television, a news anchor in a Navy blazer reported the incident with clinical detachment. Authorities are investigating the sudden appearance of a massive tree-like object, she intoned. So far, no useful leads have emerged, and local police are ill-equipped to handle it. Behind her, grainy footage from Red Tomb City flickered on the screen. Deserted streets lit only by flickering lampposts, and looming above them all, a grotesque arboreal figure. Twisting tendrils of what looked like bark and sinew rose dozens of feet into the night sky, part tree, part beast. A scrolling chyron identified the story as Strange Phenomenon in Red Tomb City. Word of this eerie colossus spreading through the city's heart traveled fast, and, unsurprisingly, the Magic Sword cult was among the first to pick up the news. They moved quickly. Ethan set the intricately forged replica of the Yama sword in its appointed place, just inside the alcove of Dante and Virgil's home. The air was tense but electric. Virgil stood apart, his human soul and demonic spirit finally severed, his features at once peaceful and fierce. Towering above them was the source of all their peril, a monstrous tree unlike any found in the mortal realm. Its trunk concealed a yawning cavern, a direct gateway to the demon world. Ethan recalled V's words, "This is Qliphoth, the great tree of the underworld. When it draws enough infernal energy, it bears a single fruit, once every few thousand years. Any demon who eats it gains power bestowed by the gods themselves. The last to taste its fruit was Mondes, and thus he rose to rule as king of demons." Tracy had told them of the ancient Spartan seal that long ago barred Qliphoth from crossing into their world. Starved of its dark nourishment, the tree had not ripened a single fruit in 2 millennia. Yet as a creature of the demon world, Qliphoth's true form was inverted. Its massive branches lay buried deep underground, while thorned roots writhed above ground, clawing skyward. Should its crown finally breach the Earth's surface, the boundary between human and demon would collapse, perhaps melding the two realms, or worse, engulfing the human world in endless night. Ethan glanced at the replica blade, heart-pounding. Here, at the threshold of Dante and Virgil's sanctuary, they hoped to halt the awakening of Qliphoth, and with it, a cataclysm no mortal could endure. Qliphoth is no ordinary tree. Its ancient, gnarled roots thirst for human blood, draining victims until all that remains are hollow shells. In a dark symbiosis with the demon Empusa, an ant-like monster that slaughters people and carries their life ants back to the tree. Qliphoth has thrived for more than 2,000 years. Its twisted branches creep from a cavern torn open by the Yama sword in the demon world, reaching into our realm to feed on mortal vitality and bear fully corrupted fruit. The stakes could not be higher. The blood spilled in Red Tomb City alone is potent enough to spawn a new demon king, Mons, ruler of all the demon legions. This is no lowly fiend. In the first and second eras, heroes required extraordinary transformations merely to stand against Demon Emperor-level foes, and even the legendary Spartan legions were crushed by Mons' power 2 millennia ago. Only when humanity raised its voice in unwavering faith did it muster the strength to defeat and seal away the Demon Emperor, temporarily ending his tyranny across both worlds. Chapter 876, The Loving Father and Dutiful Son. Prepare to perform. 2 centuries ago, the legendary magic swordsman Sparta gathered 4 sacred artifacts and legions of demons from the Holy Demon Isle to seal away chaos. He was nothing like the unstoppable war machine that folk tales would have you believe, able to conquer sky, earth, and air single-handedly, and he never acted alone. Yet at humanity's darkest hour, he rose to the challenge and vanquished the Demon Emperor as decisively as Dante would 1,000 years later. Now Red Tomb City's central plaza swells with curious onlookers. Just days ago, a colossal, tree-like structure erupted from the earth, and its sudden appearance has ignited every imagination. Some people frantically capture the sight on their devices. Others kneel to pray, murmuring Bible verses. Couples whisper wild theories about what this towering growth might mean. Though the magic sword cult holds official command over the city, Red Tomb City lies squarely in its garrison. No decree can contain the awe that ripples through the crowd. Could that really be the demon realm's fabled magic tree? Nero murmurs, his voice hushed as he gazes up at the massive trunk and sweeping branches. According to Captain Ethan, this tree is known as the Evil Tree, also called the Reverse Kabbalah. The newly minted magic swordsmen of the magic sword cult exchanged uneasy glances. They'd given up their old titles as knights in favor of something more dramatic, and now they were regretting it. "Captain Nero, what do we do?" one swordsman asked, blade quivering in his hand. Nero raised a hand to silence him, eyes fixed on the tree. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as a murmur of alarm rippled through them. A man near the front suddenly pointed skyward. "Look, what's that?" Everyone followed his finger. High in the branches, a thick, gnarled limb writhed as if alive. The wind picked up, rattling leaves against metal armor. Then, with a sickening crack, the limb gave way and crashed to the ground. A collective gasp erupted from the onlookers. The impact left jagged fissures in the asphalt, and from one of those cracks a slimy tentacle burst forth, looping and twisting as it slithered across the street. Dozens of its smaller siblings shot out simultaneously, wriggling like grotesque serpents. Horrified, the crowd froze, too late to escape. One tentacle poised above a bystander and then drove its sharpened tip straight through him. His scream tore through the air, and pandemonium broke loose as people stumbled over each other in desperation. "Form ranks!" Nero shouted, sword aloft. "Protect the civilians! Cut those things down!" Beside him, Ethan leapt forward, staff glowing with arcane light. The cult's magic swordsmen rallied around their captains, blades flashing as they waded into the fray, determined to hold the line against whatever nightmare was erupting from the evil tree. People scattered in terror, clutching their heads as long, sinuous tentacles lunged after them. The anti-Kabbalah evil tree convulsed in the town square, its writhing limbs bursting from the earth like living serpents. Each sweep of a tentacle sent merchants and townspeople alike screaming as blood spattered across the cobblestones. Nero's voice cut through the chaos. "Split into 2 teams. Half of you evacuate the civilians. Get them to safety. The rest, follow me and cut down every one of those things." "Understood," the magic swordsman called back, forming up with disciplined precision. Their long blades flashed in unison under the afternoon sun as they hacked into the monstrous tentacles. Several fell, severed cleanly at the root, but more surged up in their place, rising like a dark tide that refused to be beaten back. All around them, Red Tomb City unraveled into panic. Mothers scooped up crying children, their wails mingling with the sharp cries of the wounded. Men shoved carts and barrels aside in their rush for cover, shouting directions and prayers. Through it all, the magic sword cult weaved among the terrified crowds, parrying another tentacle here, blocking a crush of bodies there, determined to shield every innocent life. Yet despite their valor, the tree's malign influence continued to spread, and the horror showed no sign of abating. Ethan stared up at the anti-Kabbalah evil tree dominating the central square of Red Tomb City. Once a thriving, peaceful metropolis, the city had become little more than a living purgatory, and this gargantuan malformed tree was why. Its gnarled branches writhed toward the sky like skeletal claws, its roots plunged deep into the earth as though it intended to consume everything in its path. Worse still, the evil tree was a gateway to the demon realm, and with each throb of its trunk, waves of dark magic poured through, tainting the world with pure malice. "We need to sever its roots, cut off its connection to the demon realm," Captain Nero ordered, his voice sharp in the chill night air. Ethan nodded and fell in beside Nero's deputy captain as they rallied a squad of demon hunters. Armed with blessed axes and wards of silver, the team advanced toward the tree's sprawling base. Moonlight barely penetrated the tangle of knotted roots, but they pressed on, determined to reach the heart of the corruption. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when the first shriek split the night. From beneath the dark soil and shattered cobblestones, dozens of Empusa swarmed into view. These blood-drinking fiends were grotesquely malformed. Ragged wings hung from their backs, torn like old banners, and their fangs gleamed wickedly in the pale light. "Form a ring," Ethan shouted, drawing his own blessed axe. Silver runes along its blade glowed as he slashed at the lead demon. The thing collapsed in a spray of inky ichor, but more were already pressing in. Captain Nero threw a warding charm into the center of their circle. A burst of silver light flared, driving back the nearest brutes and buying the hunters a moment's respite. Ethan's heart pounded. He met the captain's eyes. "We keep them off us, and we find that root. We stop this tree tonight." Nero gave a curt nod. Together with the deputy captain rallying their comrades, they braced themselves against the onslaught. Each fallen Empusa was another step closer to freeing Red Tomb City from its unholy curse, and to reclaiming the home Ethan had once known. There was a dark pact at work here, an unholy symbiosis between the anti-Kabbalah evil tree and its Empusa minions. By feeding on human blood, the tree fueled the demons' growth and made them nearly unstoppable. "Prepare for battle," Nero barked. At his command, Ethan and the rest of the squad fanned out, each man taking cover behind ruined walls and shattered statues. Within seconds, steel rang against claw and fang, and the night air filled with the wails of dying demons. Ethan's sword flashed in the lamplight as he cut down one Empusa, only to spin and carve another out of the shadows. But their foes seemed endless. For every creature they felled, two more surged forward, mouths dripping with crimson hunger. Earlier, the demon sword cult had broken through enemy lines to shepherd civilians to safety, buying precious time, but now the full force of the horde bore down on them. Above the fray, searchlights rotated on the turbulent night sky. Reinforcements were finally at hand. Helicopters from neighboring cities, spraying brilliant flash bombs and thick clouds of smoke. Strobing bursts of light disoriented the demons, while choking plumes bought the defenders a few more desperate moments. Ethan pressed his back against crumbling stone, blade at the ready. Sweat stung his eyes, and every fiber of his body ached, but there was no retreat. As long as the evil tree thrived on suffering, they would stand and fight. Just as Nero had predicted, none of the modern weapons made a dent in the anti-Kabbalah evil tree or the demons that fed upon it. Flash grenades only pierced the inky darkness for an instant, and thick clouds of smoke did nothing to slow the creature's advance. Before long, the human army arrived. Tanks rumbled into position, armored personnel carriers bristled with guns, and squads of soldiers fanned out at the tree's edge. At first their firepower gave them the upper hand. Every shell and round shredded the Empusa demon's flesh. But once ammunition ran low, the tide turned. The demons, fueled by the tree's corrupt energy, struck back with ruthless savagery. No armor, neither steel plating nor reinforced bodysuit, could withstand those claws and blades. Soldiers' cries echoed through the twisted branches as the Empusa dragged them screaming into the demonic trunk. Even the veteran knights of the Demon Sword Order were beginning to falter. Each incantation sapped the last of their magic reserves, and every swing of their enchanted blades felt like battling through sludge. Yet the swarm showed no sign of thinning. If anything, the tree's unholy life force only seemed to empower them further. New demons poured forth, more violent and twisted with each passing moment. Ethan realized with growing dread that if things went on as they were, he wouldn't just fail to keep the townspeople safe. They'd all be slaughtered. Reinforcements from neighboring cities were already pouring in, and more would surely follow. But even the most advanced modern weapons couldn't eradicate every demon within the city walls. In the end, those soldiers would only become living sacrifices to the anti-Kabbalah's evil tree. "We need a new strategy," Ethan barked, rallying his squad officers around him. They huddled together, tossing out ideas and weighing the risks. At last, they agreed on a bold, desperate plan. Instead of pounding the tree from a distance, they would strike at its roots and sever its connection to the demon realm once and for all. Chapter 877. This is it, our only hope. Ethan's voice echoed off the cavern walls, laced with urgency. The core chamber of the demonic tree was the most perilous place in the entire underworld. One wrong step and even a captain could be lost forever. "I'll go," Ethan declared, rising to his feet. Determination blazed in his eyes. As captain, he alone could shoulder the burden of this mission. He owed that much to his team and to the father he'd sworn to protect. Under the watchful eyes of his vice-captain and the rest of the squad, Ethan stepped forward into the labyrinth of roots and darkness. The moment he passed beyond their torchlight, the air grew thick and fetid. He trod carefully along a narrow path forged from rotting branches and jagged stones. Every footfall sent a shudder through the ancient wood beneath him, as though the forest itself protested his intrusion. All around, distant roars and whispered hisses wove together into a sinister chorus. Demon scouts lurked in every shadow, skirting just out of sight before lunging forward in sudden bursts, each attack meant to drive him back or to his death. But Ethan pressed on, hand never straying far from the hilt of his blade. He paused and inhaled sharply. Ugh, it reeks of decay. The stench of garbage and carrion assaulted him, a foul reminder of how long these roots had been tainted by demonic corruption. Swallowing his revulsion, Ethan squared his shoulders and ventured deeper still, determined to face whatever horrors awaited in the heart of the demonic tree. Nero's revulsion at the putrid landscape was matched only by his grim understanding of the demon realm's true nature. The air reeked of rotting flesh and despair, a stench that chilled his spine even as it fanned his resolve into a white-hot fury. He knew that only by forging a path through this accursed land could he stand against the fiend bent on upending the world. Suddenly, a soul-rending roar rent the air, as if reality itself were tearing apart. The surrounding space warped under an unseen force. The ground trembled, dust roiled, and a crushing sense of oppression pressed in from every side. This was the power of an ancient being returned from the abyss, the Demon King reborn. Its resurrection not only stoked long-buried fears, but also heralded an even greater catastrophe to come. Nero clenched his teeth, letting fear and exhilaration surge together in his chest. When Ethan first assigned the mission, warning only that a devil had been resurrected, Nero had volunteered without hesitation. He'd known the task would be perilous, but he could never have imagined just how deadly it would prove. Ethan paused at the brink of the demon tree's gnarled root network, his heart pounding in his chest. The legends were true. The Demon King must be an immensely powerful being. Fear and exhilaration welled up inside him at the thought of facing such a foe. This was the battle he had prepared for, the chance not only to prove his strength, but to end this world-threatening evil once and for all. Everything he had fought so far had been a mere prelude. Now the real challenge lay before him. He pressed forward, stepping over broken branches and scorched earth until he reached the vast root throne at the tree's core. There, perched atop a throne woven from massive, twisting roots and vines, sat the Demon King Urizen. The creature was a grotesque fusion of humanoid and plant, its muscular body encased in thick, root-like tentacles that writhed as if brimming with malevolent life. A mantle of inky vines draped from its shoulders, swaying with an otherworldly grace that seemed to darken the very air. Urizen's head was sheathed in a dense tangle of bark-like roots, parting only to reveal 4 glowing eyes, voids of black so deep they swallowed any hint of light or hope. Those eyes locked onto Ethan's, and for an instant the ground trembled with the demon's silent roar. Ethan drew a steadying breath, tightened his grip on his weapon, and took a step forward. The final confrontation had begun. Urizen's maw stretched open to reveal rows of razor-sharp fangs, teeth that looked capable of cleaving steel in half. His claws, long and curved like frozen blades, caught the torchlight as they twitched, hungry for the kill. Worse still were the pulsating red veins crawling over his arms like living worms. 11, or perhaps more, small, sapphire-lit orbs were embedded in his flesh, extra eyes that never ceased scanning for movement. Beneath him, a steady stream of blood seeped from the gnarled throne, pooling at his feet. It was the source of his terrible power, and the silent witness to every innocent life sacrificed for his rise. "Are you the devil?" Nero's voice rang out, trembling but defiant, as he stared up at the demon. Urizen's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. "You pathetic human," he snarled, "born weak and insignificant. Soon you will know true terror. I will give you nothing but despair and death." Long ago, when Demon King Yuri first claimed this throne, he discovered the secret of their power. Human blood, spilled in agony at the roots of the reverse Kabbalah tree, was transmuted into raw magic. Creeping vines carried that corrupted lifeblood into Yuri's withered form, until, stripped of any mortal anchor, he became Urizen the Unbound, a demon lord fueled by the suffering of countless souls. The moment Ethan and Urizen squared off, the battle ignited. Urizen's power flowed directly from the evil tree of the inverted Kabbalah, its twisted vines pumping the blood of countless victims into him as raw magical fuel. Seated upon his throne, he barely stirred, his dominion over the field absolute. Hovering just before him, a blood-red crystal glowed with unholy light, the Yama demon sword made manifest. Its shimmering barrier deflected every assault, and any blow too forceful to deflect triggered the crystal's hidden defense, endless, razor-sharp spikes that lashed out in every direction, impaling the unwary. Ethan surged forward without hesitation. At first, Urizen's retorts were little more than taunts, but as Ethan closed the distance, the Dark Lord revealed his true strength. Borrowing techniques from the demon lords who once laid waste to Red Tomb City, Urizen struck with devastating precision. From Artemis's arsenal came searing laser rounds that cleaved the air like streaks of pure death. Goliath's fireballs followed, each a blazing meteor that detonated on impact, sending shockwaves through the ground. And all the while, Gerion's time deceleration barrier warped Ethan's perception, dragging each heartbeat into an agonizing crawl. Still, Ethan refused to yield. He ducked beneath a laser beam, sidestepped a rain of embers, and fought through the thick, heavy pull of distorted time. Every swing of his blade chipped away at the shield's edge. Every maneuver tested the crystal's resilience. All around him, Urizen watched with predatory calm, his power feeding on fear and blood. But Ethan was fueled by something stronger than dread, resolve. With a battle cry that shattered the twisted stillness, he lunged straight at Urizen's defenses. This time, he would break through. Ethan stood alone on the scarred battlefield, every breath he drew stirring sparks of power at his fingertips. He possessed a devastating repertoire of attacks, jagged pillars of sapphire fire that erupted from the earth, trapping foes in a blazing cage, concussive shockwaves that hurled enemies skyward, and writhing, root-like tendrils that lashed out of the ground, impaling flesh with cruel precision and driving victims into despair. In his hand, he bore the Scarlet Queen, an heirloom blade passed down through 3 generations of warriors. Its crimson steel whispered of countless battles, and now Ethan thrust its tip into the cracked earth as if to stake his claim on this accursed realm. He began a low, resonant chant, and the Scarlet Queen shuddered violently. Rivulets of molten red flame burst from the blade's edge, painting fiery arcs across the night sky with thunderous roars. "Taste this!" Ethan bellowed. Muscles coiled like a drawn bowstring then, snapped free. He lunged forward with astonishing speed, every step cracking the ground beneath him. Each swing of his sword carried the force to shatter mountains. Each leap closed the distance between him and his ultimate enemy, the Demon King. Under the blood-red glow of his blazing blade, Ethan charged into the fray, determined to end this nightmare once and for all. The Crimson Queen danced in his grasp, its blades whirling with uncanny life as they carved arcs of destruction through the air. Yet the Demon King did not flinch. With a derisive sneer, he tapped the ring of blood-red crystals hovering around him, and they flared into a flawless barrier, easily absorbing Nero's torrential assault. Chapter 878, A Father's Devotion, A Son's Loyalty. Deep within the shadowed halls of the palace, Ethan burned like a lone torch, driving back the surrounding gloom. In his grip shone the Crimson Queen, the battle-worn blade that had never failed him. Now its edge glowed a fierce scarlet, and every subtle tremor at the tip seemed to herald an imminent tempest. Across the hall floated the Demon King Urizen, and Ethan's eyes blazed with unwavering resolve. He knew that in this moment, any hesitation would mean certain death. "Take this, Urizen." Ethan's voice was low and powerful. With that single challenge, he spun into motion, the Crimson Queen carving brilliant arcs of red energy through the stale air. Each strike carried the force to shake mountains, but just as the final, earth-shattering blow should have landed, the flow of energy halted inches from the floating red crystal. It was as though an unseen hand had gently intercepted the attack, cradling it midair before allowing it to dissipate. Ethan's lips curved into a faint, wry smile, both an acknowledgement of his opponent's might and a spark of excitement at the trial still to come. Ethan knew all too well that Yuri had once ruled the demon world, and that her power far exceeded that of any ordinary being. Yet it was precisely because of her might that this battle thrilled him and demanded his absolute best. "It's not over yet," he whispered, voice low but unwavering. He shifted his stance and wrapped both hands around the hilt of the Crimson Queen. Arcane energy exploded within him, straining to break free from his flesh and fuse with the sword. With a practiced twist of his wrists, the blade flared brilliantly, its light momentarily eclipsing the gloom. A thunderous roar of unleashed magic sent the sword hurtling toward the red crystal once more, only to have the crystal stand firm, its shimmering aura intensifying like an impenetrable barrier. Ethan's brow furrowed, then eased away as determination ignited in his eyes. "Very well," he murmured, muscles coiling. "Let's see how long you can hold out." Ethan stopped holding back. Planting both feet firmly, he twisted the Crimson Queen's hilt with savage force. Every rotation sent shudders through the sword's steel and unleashed roaring jets of flame. The palace walls trembled as the air filled with the acrid tang of gunpowder and scorching embers. Still, the red crystal embedded in the blade's guard remained immovable, its inner light glowing brighter, even reflecting Nero's searing assault back at him. Bolts of fiery propellant energy ricocheted off the crystal, forcing Nero to leap backward, coughing to clear the smoke from his lungs. Nero's eyes blazed with fury. "Then I'll just have to crush you myself," he snarled. With that, he lunged forward again, channeling every ounce of power the Crimson Queen could muster. The sword in his hand flared to life, roaring like a wrathful fire dragon as it spat out torrents of blazing energy. Ethan braced himself for the final, devastating strike, but before the blow could land, a deep, resonant voice echoed through the smoking hall. Demon King Urizen had finally entered the fray. Ethan raised his hand slowly, and from the throne-like structure before him surged dozens of shadowy tentacles, striking out like venomous snakes. They moved with blistering speed and crushing force, each one capable of leveling a hill. Unfazed, Ethan drew the blue rose from his hip with his left hand. The enchanted pistol's barrel glowed with a brilliant blue light, a visible sign of his concentrated magical power. He steadied his aim at the nearest tentacle and squeezed the trigger twice in rapid succession. Bang! Bang! The palace's silence shattered as the first round, an armor-piercing shell, sliced through the tentacle's obsidian hide, exposing its vulnerable core. The second round, a high-explosive bullet, detonated inside, tearing the appendage apart and sending plumes of black smoke spiraling into the air. Yet Urizen's assault showed no sign of abating. New tentacles erupted from the throat, knee, writhing toward Ethan with even greater ferocity. Without a flicker of hesitation, Nero danced through the demon's writhing tentacles, fingers working the trigger of the blue rose. Bullets thundered out like a relentless storm, each one finding its mark. Ha! Pushing forward, he struck again. The demon's right wrist flared with savage arcane energy, just as Nero's own sword, known as the Crimson Queen, reached its 6th level of awakening. Fine cracks spidered across its ruby blade, molten power seeping through every fissure. With a feral thrust, Nero drove the blade into the Demon King Urizen's heart crystal. This time, deep fractures spread across the blood-red gem. Urizen stumbled back, genuine surprise twisting his fearsome features. He had never suspected how meticulously Ethan had orchestrated this entire confrontation, how Ethan had allowed the Demon King to overwhelm Nero time after time, only to step aside at the pivotal moment and let Nero seize victory. Nero wasn't just gifted. He'd been born with an exceptional physique and innate talent, but he'd lacked a true mentor to unlock his full power. Dante, too, had placed high hopes on Nero's future, yet he'd favored a hands-off approach, trusting in the boy's natural growth. Still, with his noble bloodline, it had always been written that Nero would rise to claim the throne of strength. And now, at last, he stood on the brink of that destiny. Ethan stood beside him now, joined by the so-called Spartan brother, the magic swordsman Apophis, and everything was about to change. Nero finally had something to strive for, his inscrutable father waiting in the shadows, and a powerful cousin whose strength matched his own. Inside Nero, something else was shifting too. He no longer felt content with the dull routine of his past life. A hunger to push his limits, to outdo himself, and to prove his worth burned brighter than ever. That fierce ambition drove him onward, shattering old boundaries and forging a stronger, more determined self. Compared to the Nero who'd spent 6 complacent years in the original timeline, this version was undeniably more mature and resilient. And yet, he was still vulnerable. Nero was in the critical throes of recovery, far from able to unleash his full power. Though the anti-Kabbalah evil tree provided him with a steady stream of magic, the blood it siphoned could not restore him to his peak. Separated from his main vessel, the Demon King Yuri remained weakened. Worse, if the evil tree's unrelenting supply of magic continued unchecked, it threatened to consume Nero entirely. With Ethan and Apophis at his back, however, Nero dared to believe that he might defy even that dark fate. Though the Nero standing before him was undeniably formidable, Ethan refused to yield to fear. With deliberate slowness, the Demon King Urizen lifted his right hand, and ripples of strange energy began to surge through the air. Chapter 879, Rumors of the Nero Family. A tremor ran through the earth as the roots of the anti-Kabbalah's corrupted tree stirred to life. Like a colossal dragon roused from a millennium of slumber, they tore free from the soil in one violent upheaval. Dozens of sinuous, python-like tendrils shot toward Ethan with thunderous roars and high-pitched hisses. Each tip bristled with needle-sharp barbs, tiny, voracious fangs capable of siphoning blood and vitality in an instant. Ethan's eyes went wide. He barely had a moment to react before the nearest tendril lashed out. With impossible speed, he twisted away, his form a blur in the dim light. Each dodge was flawless, as though he simply melted into the air, leaving only after-images in his wake. But this was only the beginning. Demon King Urizen's assault surged like a storm tide. Every writhing root carried terrible force and blinding speed, lashing at Ethan from every angle. He had no clear advantage, only his own strength, honed by years of relentless training. Still, he stood his ground. On his right wrist gleamed the Scarlet Queen, the maddeningly alive blade Urizen favored. Flames flickered along its scarlet edge, as if the weapon itself hungered for blood. In that instant, Ethan sensed the sword's cruel intelligence, the way it seemed to pulse in time with its master's fiendish heartbeat. Steeling himself, Ethan tightened his grip on the Scarlet Queen's hilt. The fate of the Nero family, and perhaps the world, rested on this clash of wills, and though the demon's onslaught threatened to overwhelm him, he refused to yield. This was his moment to fight back. Ethan swung his blade in blazing arcs, each stroke cleaving through the jagged red crystals that barred his path. Shards of crimson rock flew aside, forging a corridor straight to the Demon King, Urizen. When the edge of the Scarlet Queen slammed into Urizen's magic barrier, the very air shuddered. Urizen's eyes widened. He had badly underestimated Ethan's power. Under the relentless assault of the Scarlet Blade, his barrier collapsed in an instant. With a single, decisive slash, Ethan severed the Demon King's right hand, sending a spray of blood and raw mana into the void. Shock registered on Urizen's face, and a fierce joy blazed in Ethan's chest. At last, I've done it, Ethan panted, victory shining in his eyes. His triumph, however, proved short-lived. Urizen unleashed a thunderous roar and condensed invisible magic into a solid, cataclysmic punch. The blow struck Ethan with the force of an avalanche, knocking him back and smashing the Scarlet Queen against the ground. The sword that had served him faithfully for years shattered into countless fragments, each piece skittering across the battlefield like dying embers. Ethan's body slammed against the gnarled bark of the anti-Kabbalah evil tree with bone-crushing force. Pain and shock roared through him, stealing his breath, and yet he refused to stay down. He couldn't afford to lose here. Towering above him, the Demon King Urizen sneered. Foolish mortal, clumsy, pathetic, utterly useless. Ethan's blood burned at the insult. How dare this demon lord mock the blood of the Scarlet Queen? Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself upright. A dark band around his right wrist glowed, and from it sprang the legendary blade Apophis. As fury coursed through his veins, the sword's runes blazed like a miniature sun, reshaping the blade into a living inferno of destruction. Enough talk, Ethan growled. Face me, Urizen. Let's finish this. He raised Apophis high, its fiery edge humming with raw power, and hurtled at the Demon King. Urizen staggered back, hastily reforging the shattered red crystal in his gauntlet into a crude protective seal. The shattered crystal shards drifted together, coalescing with a crackle of arcane energy as the Demon King braced himself. Ethan's roar shattered the charged silence. With Apophis ablaze, he struck at Urizen's defenses, the impact sending shockwaves through the clearing. Each strike sizzled with anti-Kabbalistic power, threatening to rend the very air, and perhaps the Demon King's regenerated flesh, apart. As the two adversaries clashed, the anti-Kabbalah evil tree's gnarled roots writhed around them, feeding dark magic into the fray. Ethan knew he had only one chance to break through Urizen's warded barrier. Summoning every last ounce of his Scarlet Queen heritage, he prepared a final, devastating blow, one that would decide whether he fell here or stood victorious. Crack! Ethan's sword struck the red crystal and shattered it in an instant. From the broken fragments emerged a wicked little dagger. What on earth is that? He muttered, eyes narrowing. A chill ran down his spine, the blade pulsed with dark power. Before he could react, the Demon King Urizen flicked his wrist, and the dagger dissolved in thin air. With a cruel smile, Urizen lunged back into the fray. Suppressing his unease, Ethan steadied his stance and met the Demon King's assault blade to blade. Sparks flew with every impact as Ethan fought with every ounce of strength he possessed. Far away, Virgil, currently using the alias V in his human form, suddenly detected overwhelming magical fluctuations. They thundered through the anti-Kabbalah evil tree like a storm. What's happening down there? Someone's battling that Demon King? He wondered, alarm mounting. V had planned to confront Demon King Urizen alongside Dante, but now it seemed a third party had already entered the fight. Still recovering his strength, he worried he'd arrived too late. With a swift incantation, V plunged into the winding corridors of the evil tree, determined to see who dared challenge Urizen. The ground trembled with every roar from the Demon King, and the entire tree shuddered under the force of their clash. Those tremors alone spoke volumes. This unknown warrior was no ordinary opponent. Guided by his loyal familiar, V pressed forward, eager to uncover the identity of this mysterious combatant. Ethan had become the living embodiment of the humanity and trauma that Virgil had cast aside. Every surge of his power left him weaker than before. Yet now, with everything on the line, hesitation was a luxury he couldn't afford. When Ethan burst into the chamber, the Demon King Urizen was already tearing through the stone wall. Standing his ground, Nero brandished Apophis, the demon blade, its edge wreathed in infernal flame. With a fierce roar, Nero drove the sword into Urizen's chest. "No!" Ethan cried out, heart hammering in his ribs. Blood welled around the wound as Urizen staggered. He rasped, Who? Who are you?" Nero pivoted to face Ethan, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Who are you supposed to be?" Gasping for breath, the Demon King wheezed. "What?" Nero's lips curved into a grim half-smile. Despite his mortal injury, Urizen still had the strength to speak. "Should have aimed for my head," Nero muttered. In that moment, reality itself splintered, a jagged rifty air, and with a swift motion, Urizen slipped through it and vanished. Apophis clattered to the cavern floor, slicing into the demonic earth as if it were mere water. No resistance, no protest. Ethan let out a shaky breath of relief. He'd feared the Demon King's life would end at Nero's hand. For now, though, the immediate threat had passed, and Ethan knew they'd need every ounce of strength to face whatever came next. Ethan's blade shone with lethal intent, but by his family's ancient tradition, it could never slay the Demon King Urizen. Still, it was more than enough to drive the fiend back, leaving him grievously wounded as he fled into the shadows. Before Ethan could give chase, a calm voice interrupted him. "My name is V." Ethan turned. A slender man stood there, pale as moonlight and composed as ever. Ethan studied him warily. A moment ago, V had murmured no when the Demon King's scream echoed through the hollow cavern. What had he meant by that? "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked. V met Ethan's gaze evenly. "I heard movement," he replied simply. "This place is too dangerous. We should leave at once." Ethan hesitated. He'd sworn to eliminate Demon King Urizen. That was the very purpose of his first mission. "I know," he said, voice firm, "but he's badly wounded. I can't let him escape entirely." V's lips curved into a faint half-smile. He could see that Ethan's power rivaled even Dante's. "You won't find him again. Not so easily. He's concealed himself deep within the heart of the Anti-Kabbala's evil tree, waiting for his unholy fruit to ripen. No ordinary hunter could track him there." Ethan glanced back toward the tunnel from which Urizen had fled, determination hardening in his eyes. "Then I'll go after him myself." V nodded once, respectfully. "Very well, but heed my warning. The deeper you go, the darker the magic becomes. Be prepared." Ethan sheathed his sword and took a steadying breath. The fate of the realm depended on this hunt, and he would see it through, no matter the danger. Chapter 880. The Horror of the Fruit. With the citizens of Red Tomb City driven into panic and flight, the Anti-Kabbala evil tree found its blood supply cut off. The Empusa demons, starved of vitality, retreated deeper into the city's labyrinthine underbelly, while the tree's gnarled roots spread hungrily through every shattered street and ruin, seeking fresh sustenance. Nero scoured the wreckage for any sign of Demon King Urizen, but the king had vanished without a trace. Left with no choice but brute force, Nero's allies in the magic sword cult devised a desperate plan: bore into the tree's root crown, install arcane explosives, and detonate them all at once, hopefully uprooting the abomination in a single, devastating blast. Watching this operation unfold, V felt a rising tide of anxiety. The cult's engineers worked with alarming speed and precision, so bold, so unrestrained, that even he hesitated to interfere directly. Summoning Dante and the others was out of the question. If the Demon King himself couldn't overcome Nero's youthful prowess, Dante would stand no chance against the same foe. Determined to buy Urizen more time, V slipped into the shadows of the collapsed cathedral where the root network wound like living steel. There, he began to sabotage the bomb riggers' preparations, tampering with fuses, misaligning runic seals, and spreading false rumors about an impending counterattack to slow them down. From a lofty ledge overhead, Ethan watched both sides maneuver with cool detachment. The entire contest of wit and will played out below him like a grand chess match. He could feel V's schemes unraveling as the cult's sappers regained their footing, seals glinting with lethal promise. When it seemed V might be discovered at any moment, Ethan leaped into action. With a roar that shook dust from the rafters, he descended among the thundering roots and flashing swords, aligning himself at last with the hidden power of Demon King Urizen and tipping the balance in their favor. Ethan's goal was straightforward: to enjoy himself, and he already had a plan in motion. But there was one indispensable element he couldn't omit: Nero. So he sent Nero a message. According to Grandfather Apophis' notes, the message read, "The Anti-Kabbala tree isn't like any other tree in our world. Its roots grow skyward while its branches dig down, and once it absorbs enough energy, it bears fruit at those upward-pointing roots. That's where you'll find it, waiting for those strange fruits to ripen." With that clue in hand, Nero ventured to the cavern beneath the Anti-Kabbala tree. No one knew exactly where it would lead, but as soon as Nero stepped inside, he understood. The tunnel opened into the demon realm. Crossing that threshold felt like slipping between cracks in space and time. The air turned thick and viscous, each breath heavy with an indescribable blend of rot and seduction. All around him, grotesque plants writhed and intertwined, some pulsing with a sickly glow, others stinking of decay so foul it nearly brought Nero to his knees. Every twisted vine, Every uncanny bloom spoke of a world warped by madness and corruption. But Nero pressed on, drawn by Ethan's instructions and the promise of those otherworldly fruits. The deeper he walked, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as though the land itself resented his presence. Yet he couldn't turn back, not when Ethan and the mission depended on him. In the very heart of the garden's forbidden grove, Ethan halted before a ring of jagged roots. Above him loomed the wicked anti-Kabbalah tree, its bark twisted into grotesque knots of corruption, and from its lowest bough dangled a single blood-red orb. The tortoise fruit gleamed like liquid sin, its surface pulsing with an eerie, inviting light that tugged at the soul, daring any who passed to claim it. "Urizen," Ethan called, voice steady even as his heart hammered. He drew his enchanted sword, its blade humming with purest magic. "There's nowhere left to hide. Today, I end your tyranny." A low, mirthless laugh rolled through the ruined colonnade. The Demon King emerged from the shadows, towering in ancient armor etched with eldritch runes that flickered like dying embers. His eyes burned with infernal triumph. "Foolish mortal," he sneered. "You carry no demon's blood, and yet you come to challenge me with that fragile blade? Such courage or such stupidity." Ethan squared his shoulders. "I stand for every soul you've devoured." At his words, the tortoise fruit above them flared brighter, its crimson glow surging as though newly born. In every telling, this fruit should have taken the blood of thousands to ripen, but now it glowed fully grown, its power fed on the life force of tens of thousands. That unnatural acceleration brimmed the air with erratic, crackling energy. Urizen's armor shivered under the fruit's dark radiance, his form swelling with unpredictable strength. The garden's air thickened, each breath tasting of brimstone and dread. Ethan tightened his grip on the sword's hilt. The final reckoning had begun, face to face with the Demon King, under the portentous glow of a fruit born from a massacre. He would not falter now. "The power of this extraordinary fruit is exactly what I expected. With it, I can have anything, even this entire world." As Nero looked on, Ethan spoke the words and, without a moment's hesitation, snatched up the paravat and swallowed it whole. Instantly, the garden trembled beneath their feet. The anti-Kabbalah tree blazed with a fierce, blinding light, and a shockwave of energy burst from Ethan's form, shattering the armored restraints that had bound him. Ethan had no doubts about Nero's might, so he accepted the fruit without question. Its power surged through him, melting away the corrupted bark of the anti-Kabbalah tree that had encrusted his body. Piece by piece, the dark coating fell away, unveiling the horrifying shape beneath. Where once stood a man, now crawled a creature clad in dark blue scales. Dozens of eyes, some large and round, others narrow and slitted, dotted every inch of his flesh, each one wide open as if to peer into the world's deepest secrets. And at the center of his chest flared a single enormous yellow eye, its unblinking gaze humming with ancient malice. It seemed almost alive, slowly turning on its axis and radiating a crushing, heart-stopping pressure. Urizen threw his head back and laughed, a sound full of madness and triumph. "Ha ha ha, this is true power!" He could feel his strength surging at an astonishing rate, as though the entire world bowed to his will. Spreading his arms, he fixed Nero with a triumphant glare. "Now, let me end you." Nero's impatience flared. He cracked a snarling grin. "Humph, if you think you can." In the next instant, Urizen's fist rocketed forward. Nero met it with a mighty swing of his enchanted sword, Apophis. The two forces collided in a deafening boom that rattled the cavern walls. Nero staggered beneath the impact. This was not the Urizen he'd fought before. With one devastating blow, Urizen shattered the barrier of the anti-Kabbalah demonic tree. Splintered wood and arcane energy exploded outward, hurling Nero through the gap and sending him skidding into the world beyond. Urizen stood amid the wreckage, chest heaving, eyes alive with dark exultation. This is power, the blood of 10,000 souls forged into a single demon. Watching from a safe distance, Ethan's mind raced. That reverse Kabbalah tree was no mere curiosity. It was a font of unimaginable might. If he could transport and replicate it in the Marvel Universe, he could produce legions of devil-level combatants. The possibilities were staggering. The Demon King's arrival in the Devil May Cry world changed everything. Even by its own outrageous standards, his power rivaled legends like Dormammu. No mere mortal could stand against him, and certainly not Nero, who had already learned this the hard way. After Urizen consumed the forbidden fruit, his strength skyrocketed. His first goal was to conquer the demon realm and crown himself its undisputed ruler. With that army of fiends at his command, he would breach the barrier into the human world, and he no longer needed the Yamato demon sword to do it. His own power alone could rend the veil between worlds. Nero staggered through the shattered streets of Red Tomb City, agony tearing at every muscle. Each step felt as though he were walking on broken glass. Thankfully, Apophis, the living magic sword at his side, drew demonic energy from the air and poured it back into his body, knitting bone and sinew together. He pressed a hand to the ruin of his side, wincing. Urizen's strength, it's overwhelming, Nero gasped. I can't face him like this. With what little voice he had left, Nero called out to Ethan, who rallied the last of their allies atop the battered city walls. Ethan, we have to act now, before Urizen shatters both realms. Ethan's jaw clenched as he surveyed the scene. A phalanx of armored knights, the fearsome Order of the Demon Sword, had already sealed every exit. Beneath their blockade, the city smoldered, its people trapped between two horrors. Nero's regret cut deeper than any wound. He had never imagined a single fruit could bestow such cataclysmic power on Urizen. Now, with Urizen's ascent complete and the demon hordes gathering, Ethan and Nero faced a stark choice. Stand and fight or watch their world fall. Chapter 881, The Toy is Ready. It's done, Nero announced triumphantly. The moment he spoke, Ethan seized the opportunity. Go find Dante, he instructed. Only Dante could unlock the device's full potential, and without him, all this effort would have been wasted. Nero slipped away from the crowded workshop, weaving through a throng of artisans and apprentices until he reached Dante's office. The door was a little worse for wear, its varnish peeling, the wood grain weathered, but the promise of its contents was enough to quicken Nero's step. He pushed it open and was immediately greeted by the comforting scent of strong coffee and musty old books, as if he'd stepped back in time. Hey, kid, what brings you here? Dante's voice drifted from a shadowed corner, lazy yet amused. Nero strode past a cluttered desk piled high with manuscripts and arcane diagrams. Without hesitation, he relayed Ethan's message. The toy was finished and ready for Dante's inspection. A roguish smile curved Dante's lips, and his eyes sparkled with anticipation. Perfect, he drawled, running a hand through his dark hair. Just what I needed. He tapped a few keys on an ancient typewriter, sending a brief but urgent communiqué to the demonic sword order. In recent years, the order had grown from a ragtag band of demon hunters into a well-funded alliance with sympathetic government officials. Those officials, alarmed by rising demonic activity, had agreed to pour substantial funds into their operations. They'd even acknowledged the demon's existence publicly, a rare admission, but their own trained troops still struggled to contain the threat. Now, with Dante's expertise and Ethan's innovation joined at last, the order was about to gain an edge it desperately needed. Dante's grin widened as he rolled up his sleeves. Let's see what this thing can really do. Ethan watched from the edge of the council chamber as the officials sealed their decision. After the calamity in Red Tomb City, it was clear that only the Magic Sword Order's swift intervention had prevented a massacre. Now the city's leaders were throwing their full weight behind the order, promising unlimited funds for every operation, including the costly task of hiring Dante. Even so, Dante never worked for money alone. A devil by nature, he'd take on any assignment, paid or unpaid, as long as it piqued his interest. Ethan, for his part, hadn't planned to offer him a cent. He simply needed the job done. Dante leaned back in his chair, one brow raised. Fine, I'll do it, but remember, I have my own rules. Before anyone could respond, Nero, Ethan's cousin and the Order's liaison, stepped forward with a flourish. From his pocket, he produced a sleek laminated card stamped with the Magic Sword Order's seal. Dante frowned at the card. What's this? Nero grinned. Consider it your retainer. 1 free pizza every week for a year, courtesy of the Order. Free pizza for a year? Dante's eyes widened so fast they nearly popped out of his skull. His usual devilish composure vanished. He looked like a kid who just won the lottery. That's right, Nero said, still smiling. My father heard you had a fondness for pizza, so he had these made up. No strings attached. Ethan suppressed a chuckle. In the end, it wasn't gold or jewels that sealed Dante's cooperation, but something far more irresistible, a year's worth of pizza. With Dante on board, their plan to safeguard Red Tomb City could finally move forward. Dante rolled his eyes. If I handed over cash, Trish and Letty would swindle me blind. And don't get me started on Morrison's endless nagging about utility and gas bills. But a pizza coupon? That's perfect for me. I don't pay rent or utilities, and I can go a month without flushing the toilet. Skip pizza for a month, though? No way. He treated the voucher like a treasure, tucking it carefully into his pocket. So, where do I actually redeem this thing? Ethan chuckled. I've arranged for someone to open a pizza shop right next to your office. You can pick up any pizza you like, whenever you lie. Key. Nero raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Dante's grin stretched from ear to ear. It was an ideal solution, even if the coupon had no cash value. Great. Now let's go take out that guy Urizen. He knew full well how strong Nero was. After all, the Demon King Yuri had shown up out of nowhere and beaten Dante himself. But how much trouble could it be? The answer came almost at once. They ended up flattened like dogs. Ethan paced the chamber, making no secret of his impatience. Word had come that Yuri, having devoured the blood fruit essences of tens of thousands, was now far stronger than the story's original trajectory ever allowed. Unless Dante truly transformed into a demon, any showdown with Yuri would be hopeless. Dante himself was already on the back foot. Humiliated and beaten, he'd been forced to tag along with Nero into the Demon Sword Order, desperate for any edge. And now the Order intended to move against Ethan, yet even Dante doubted their combined strength. Him and Ethan's two cousins could stand against Urizen alone. Ethan stopped before Dante, eyes cold but curious. You really think you can't handle Urizen? He asked. Dante shrugged, though his gaze flickered with uncertainty. With Yuri this empowered, yes, we need something more than swords and old tactics. Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. Actually, there is. Your biggest problem right now isn't strategy, it's raw magical power. That's why the Great Sword of Rebellion and the Sword of Sparta exist. They were forged by the magic swordsman Sparta himself, and my father's notes say those blades hold exactly the mana you're missing. Dante frowned. Show me. Ethan nodded briskly. All right. First, the Sword of Sparta. He gestured, and a long, narrow blade emblazoned with ancient runes materialized in the air. Ethan lifted it, then pressed the tip against his shoulder. Dante tensed as Ethan drove the sword's edge through his tunic, just a shallow wound, then pulled it out. Brilliant blue energy flared around Ethan's arm, weaving into his veins in a living current. His eyes glowed for a heartbeat, then dimmed to normal. You feel that? Ethan asked. Dante stared at him, breath coming fast. Yes, that's pure magical force. Good. Next, the Great Sword of Rebellion. A second blade, broader and darker, hovered before them. Ethan repeated the motion, piercing himself just above the heart. Black-tinged mana spiraled out from the wound, binding into his core. He steadied himself, letting the power settle, then withdrew the blade. Now you try, Ethan said, stepping aside. The process is the same. Let the swords awaken your latent energy. Once you've absorbed both streams, you'll have enough magic to challenge Urizen, and maybe even Yuri if you push it. Dante swallowed, eyes alight with determination. He lifted the Sword of Sparta, addressed his fear head-on, and plunged the blade into his own shoulder. As the first surge of blue power hugged his bones, he gritted his teeth and reached for the next step, ready to stake everything on the promise of newfound strength. Is this all right? Ethan gasped, though it felt as if countless blades were tearing through him. He'd endured the Sword of Rebellion's strike before, but each time the agony was just as intense. Resolute, he reached behind him and seized the Spartan sword. The moment he held both weapons, a surge of power roared through his veins. Ethan drew in every ounce of magical energy the two swords could offer, until their forces fused into one. In an instant, he was reborn as a true demon. True demons stood above ordinary devils, entities of overwhelming power and purity of form. Ethan's new guise retained echoes of the legendary True Demon from Devil May Cry 2, yet it was uniquely his. Armor-like obsidian plating traced with molten veins of light, a raw, untamed savagery pulsing through every inch of him. Two pairs of wings unfurled from his back, one above the other, each wreathed in fiery energy that crackled and flared with his heartbeat. His very presence radiated heat, and his eyes burned with unquenchable fire. With a single thought, he summoned what would become his signature weapon, the demon sword. It sprang into being at his side, a blade forged from the essence of the rebellion sword merged with the Spartan demon sword's might. Its edge shimmered with both knives' fused power, proof that he had not only mastered these ancient arms but had made them part of his own being. As Ethan took in the full scope of his transformed body, a deep, resonant roar escaped him. His true demon form had awakened, marking the birth of an unstoppable force, one born from pain, sharpened by conquest, and alive with demonic fire. Ethan reviewed everything he'd learned about Dante's transformations. Demon Dante, the half-human, half-demon form, let him channel infernal power without fully surrendering his humanity. But the true demon state was something else entirely. A total metamorphosis, in which Dante's body and spirit became pure devil. Nicole had even claimed that, in this ultimate form, Dante might outmatch the legendary demon swordsman Sparta. The showdown with Virgil had clinched it. By consuming a Qliphoth fruit, Virgil had demonstrated that anyone who masters their demonic essence can ascend to the true demon level. It wasn't some artifact like the sword of Sparta that made the difference, Ethan realized. It was raw, accumulated magical energy. Dante and Virgil had simply learned to wield their inner darkness more fully. Is this the true measure of power? Ethan whispered to himself. He knew Dante's potential was limitless once he tapped into that strength. So when Dante prepared to challenge Urizen again, Ethan insisted on bringing V along. He was eager to witness Dante's reborn power and to see how Urizen would fare against it. Hidden in the shadows, V watched as Dante unleashed the true demon form. Wings of inky blackness sprouted from his back, and every swing of his blade crackled with unholy energy. Within moments, Urizen lay defeated. Then Dante hurled V down from the sky, letting him crash onto Urizen's prone body with a triumphant roar. As dust swirled around them, Ethan had no doubt, with the true demon force at his side, his friend Dante could conquer any foe.